The week following Hoffman's sacrifice had passed in a blur of repairs, strategy sessions, and a heavy silence that seemed to permeate every corner of the station. Hack found himself constantly checking the empty berth where Hoffman's ship should have been, a stark reminder of the price they'd paid for their latest victory. As Hack made his way to the mandatory meeting called by race officials, he couldn't shake a sense of unease. Change was coming, he could feel it in his whiskers. The meeting hall was packed with racers from every team. Hack noticed the surviving members of Hoffman's crew huddled together, their faces a mixture of grief and determination. Jeb nodded to them as he took his seat, Hack close behind. A hush fell over the crowd as the lead race official stepped up to the podium. His face was an expressionless mask as he surveyed the assembled racers. "Gentlemen, ladies, and beings of all designations," he began, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "Recent events have, shall we say, captured the public's imagination in ways we hadn't anticipated." Hack felt Jeb tense beside him. They both knew he was referring to Hoffman's sacrifice. "The emotional response from our viewers has been unprecedented," the official continued. "In light of this, we've decided to implement some changes to increase audience engagement." He paused, letting the words sink in. Hack's fur bristled with anticipation. "Effective immediately, all race crews will be subject to regular interviews. These will be broadcast to our viewers, allowing them to feel more connected to you all." A murmur ran through the crowd. Hack glanced at Jeb, whose face had hardened into an unreadable mask. Furthermore, the official went on, seemingly oblivious to the discomfort in the room, crews are now required to do everything in their power to endear themselves to the public, particularly to your sponsors. Jeb leaned in close to Hack, his voice a low growl. "Of course, this is just so they can skim more off the top from sponsor donations." Hack nodded grimly. The commercialization of their struggle was becoming more blatant by the day. The official wasn't finished. "We're also introducing a new element of audience participation. High-paying viewers will now have the opportunity to vote on certain aspects of each race." This announcement was met with outright gasps and mutters of disbelief. Hack felt a chill run down his spine. Their lives, already at risk in every race, were now going to be further jeopardized for the entertainment of wealthy viewers. "I know this may seem unconventional," the official said, his tone suggesting he couldn't care less about their opinions. "But I assure you, this will only serve to increase the excitement and unpredictability of our races." As the meeting concluded and the racers began to file out, Hack noticed a change in the atmosphere. The usual post-meeting chatter was subdued, replaced by worried whispers and furtive glances. "What do you make of all this?" Captain Hack asked as they made their way back to the Broken Promise. Jeb was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "They're scared," Hack, he finally said. "What happened with Hoffman, the alliances we formed. We're changing the game faster than they can control it. So they're trying to shift the narrative, make it about entertainment rather than our fight for freedom." Hack nodded, seeing the logic. "But how do we fight back against this?" A small, determined smile played at the corners of Jeb's mouth. "We play their game, but we play it our way. If they want stories, we'll give them stories. But we'll make sure the truth gets out there too. About the corruption, about what we're really fighting for." As they reached the Broken Promise, Hack felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, the rules had changed, but their goal remained the same. Freedom, justice, and now, perhaps, the chance to tell their story to the entire universe. "Better brush up on your public speaking," Hack Jeb said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Sounds like we're all going to be stars soon." Hack groaned inwardly at the thought of being interviewed, but he squared his shoulders. If this was what it took to further their cause, then so be it. The universe was watching now, and the crew of the Broken Promise was ready to show them what they were made of. The murmurs in the meeting hall had barely died down when the lead race official cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention once more. Hack's whiskers twitched nervously, sensing another bombshell about to drop. "Now, on to our next order of business," the official began, his tone unnervingly casual. "In light of recent incidents, we've decided to implement a comprehensive overhaul of our weapons policies." Hacked felt Killian stiffen beside him. Their weapons officer's hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm would be if they were allowed to carry them on the station. Effective immediately, all traditional weapons systems are banned from races, the official continued. His words met with a chorus of disbelief and outrage from the assembled racers. Jeb leaned in close to Hacked, his voice a low whisper. No weapons? They might as well ask us to race in paper ships. The official raised his hand for silence. However, we recognize the strategic value that combat brings to our races. Therefore, we're introducing a new system for weapons testing and implementation. Hack's ears perked up, curiosity overriding his initial shock. Moving forward, races will serve as a testing ground for new weapons technologies. Manufacturers will pay a fee to have their latest innovations featured in our events. Jeb's eyes narrowed. Of course, he muttered. Another revenue stream for them. All weapons systems must undergo rigorous pre-race inspections, the official went on. They will be evaluated to ensure they are not excessively damaging and pose no threat to race officials or our valued audience members. Hacked couldn't help but notice the official's priorities in that statement. The safety of the racers themselves seemed to be an afterthought. As the meeting concluded and the racers filed out, the air was thick with tension and speculative chatter. Hacked, Jeb, and Killian huddled together in a quiet corner of the corridor. This changes everything, Killian growled, his scarred face twisted in frustration. How are we supposed to defend ourselves out there? Jeb's face was thoughtful. We adapt, he said simply. Like we always do. Hacked, any ideas? Hack's mind was already racing, considering the implications of the new rules. Well, they banned traditional weapons, but what about non-traditional ones? Things that aren't primarily designed as weapons but could be used defensively. A slow smile spread across Jeb's face. Now, you're thinking. Killian, remember that equipment malfunction we had a few races back? The one that scattered all those spare parts behind us. Killian's eyes lit up with understanding. The steel ball bearings? Yeah, caused quite a mess for the ships behind us. Exactly, Jeb nodded. Not a weapon in the traditional sense, but still effective. Hacked, do you think you could design a deployment system for something like that? A cloud of small, solid objects. Hacked's whiskers twitched with excitement as he considered the possibilities. A steel ball cloud instead of a mine cloud? It's definitely doable, Captain, and I bet it would pass their weapons inspections too. Good thinking, both of you, Jeb said, clapping them on the shoulders. We'll present it as a safety measure for clearing debris. They can't argue with that. As they made their way back to the broken promise, Hack's mind was abuzz with calculations and designs. The new rules were clearly intended to restrict them, to make the races more controlled and commercialized. But in typical fashion, the crew was already finding ways to turn these restrictions to their advantage. You know, Hack mused as they reached their ship, these new policies might actually work in our favor. With weapons manufacturers paying to test their tech in races, we might end up with more advanced defensive systems than we had before. Jeb nodded, a glint of determination in his eye. Exactly. They think they're tightening the noose, but they're really just giving us new tools to work with. We'll show them that it takes more than a few rule changes to break the spirit of the broken promise. As they boarded their ship, ready to begin preparations for the next race, Hacked felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, the game was changing, but so were they. And if there was one thing the crew of the Broken Promise excelled at, it was adapting to survive and thrive against all odds. The universe was watching, the rules were changing, but their resolve remained unbroken. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Hack knew they would face them head-on, with ingenuity, courage, and just a touch of rebellious creativity. The announcement came over the station's comm system, jolting Hack from his calculations. Attention all racers. The next event will be a straight-line course from Planet Theta to the nearby Casino space station. Estimated race duration 5 hours. Prepare for departure in 24 hours. Jeb gathered the crew for a strategy session, his face set with determination. All right, people, this race is going to be different. Not just because of the new weapons rules, but because of all this public relations nonsense. Hack nodded, his whiskers twitching nervously at the thought of being interviewed. Numbers and calculations he could handle, but talking to an audience. That was a different kind of challenge entirely. Hack Jeb continued, I need you to plot us the most efficient course possible. With no weapons to slow down our competitors, our navigation has to be perfect. Understood, Captain Hack replied, already running scenarios in his mind. A straight line sounds simple, but factoring in gravitational influences from theta and surrounding bodies, there's room for optimization. Killian chimed in, his scarred face twisted in a wry grin. And what about our little safety measure? When do we deploy the ball bearings? Jeb's eyes gleamed with a mix of mischief and strategy. We'll save that for the end, when everyone's getting desperate. Hacked, make sure to factor that into your calculations. We'll need a clear path after deployment to avoid our own trap. As the crew dispersed to their tasks, a station official appeared at the airlock. Captain Sheets, your crew has been scheduled for pre-race interviews. Please follow me. Hacked felt his stomach drop. This was their first test in the new world of public scrutiny. As they were led to a makeshift studio, Jeb pulled his crew close. Remember, he said in a low voice, we're not just racing for ourselves anymore. We're the face of every racer who's been wronged by this system. Let's make our story heard. The interviews were a whirlwind of lights, cameras, and probing questions. Hacked found himself stammering through inquiries about navigation techniques and the challenges of racing through space. But as the questions continued, he felt something shift inside him. These weren't just interviews, they were a chance to tell their story, to let the universe know what they were really fighting for. When asked about the loss of Hoffman, Hack surprised himself with his eloquence. Hoffman was more than just a fellow racer, he said, his voice steady. He was a symbol of what these races could be about: cooperation, about standing up for what's right, even in the face of a system designed to pit us against each other. Jeb, in his interview, was a natural. He spoke passionately about their quest for freedom, about the injustices they'd faced, and about their hope for a better future. Hacked could almost feel the audience being swayed by his words. As they returned to the broken promise, exhausted but oddly exhilarated, Jeb gathered them once more. Good work out there, all of you, he said, pride evident in his voice. We've given them something to think about. Now let's make sure we back it up with a race they'll never forget. The next hours were a blur of activity. Hacked fine-tuned their course, accounting for every gravitational nuance and potential obstacle. Killian worked with the engineering team to perfect their steel ball cloud deployment system, ensuring it would pass the weapons inspections. As the race start approached, Hacked felt a familiar mix of anxiety and excitement. But there was something else too, a sense of purpose that went beyond just winning. They were racing for freedom, yes, but also for the chance to change the very nature of these competitions. The broken promise hummed with energy as they maneuvered into their starting position. Through the view screen, Hacked could see the twinkling lights of the casino station in the far distance, their finish line, barely visible against the backdrop of space. Jeb's voice cut through the pre-race tension. Whatever happens out there, remember, we're not just racers anymore. We're revolutionaries. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. The starting klaxon blared, and the broken promise shot forward, joining the pack of racers as they hurtled towards the distant casino station. Hack's paws flew over his console, constantly adjusting their course to account for the subtle gravitational influences he'd mapped out. Status report, Jeb called out, his hands steady on the controls. We're holding steady in 4th position, Captain Hack reported. The lead ships are pushing their engines hard. At this rate, they'll burn out before we're halfway there. Jeb nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Let them. We're playing the long game here. As they settled into the rhythm of the race, Hack became aware of a small red light blinking on his console. The interviews weren't over, they were being broadcast live during the race itself. Hack Jeb's voice cut through his concentration. You're up. Remember, be yourself. Let them see the real you. Swallowing hard, Hack activated the comm link. Immediately, a holographic display sprang to life, showing a perky interviewer with far too much enthusiasm for someone not risking their life in a space race. How exciting to catch you mid-race, the interviewer gushed. Tell us, What's going through your mind right now? For a moment, Hacked froze. Then he remembered Jeb's words. Be yourself. Well, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. Right now I'm calculating our trajectory through a particularly tricky gravitational eddy caused by the interaction between Theta and its largest moon. It's fascinating, really, the way space bends and flexes, creating these invisible currents that can make or break a race. To his surprise, the interviewer seemed genuinely interested. That sounds incredibly complex. How do you manage to keep track of all those factors while racing at such high speeds? As Hacked launched into an explanation of his navigation techniques, he felt himself relaxing. This wasn't so different from explaining calculations to the crew. And maybe, just maybe, he could use this platform to show the audience the real challenges they faced. The interview continued intermittently throughout the race, with different crew members taking their turns in the spotlight. Killian grudgingly discussed the challenges of racing without traditional weapons. It's not about the firepower, he growled. It's about protecting your team. Out here, we're all we've got. Jeb, as always, was a natural. He spoke passionately about their quest for freedom, weaving in stories of past races and the bonds they'd formed with other crews. Hacked could almost feel the audience being drawn in, seeing the races not just as entertainment, but as a struggle for justice. As they passed the halfway point of the race, still holding steady in fourth place, Hack noticed something odd on his sensors. Captain, he called out, the lead ship is starting to slow down. Looks like engine trouble. Jeb leaned forward, studying the tactical display. Just like you predicted, Hacked. They pushed too hard, too fast. All right, people, this is our chance. Let's show them what the broken promise can do. With precise adjustments to their course and a perfectly timed burst of speed, they overtook the faltering lead ship. As they moved into third place, then second, Hacked felt a surge of excitement. They were close now, so close to another victory. But he knew the real challenge was yet to come. As the casino station grew larger in their view screen, the desperation of the other racers would only increase. They'd saved their secret weapon for this moment, knowing that the final stretch would be where they needed it most. Hack's paws hovered over the controls for the steel ball cloud, ready to deploy at Jeb's command. The finish line was in sight, but the most dangerous part of the race was just beginning. As they entered the final hour, tensions high and victory tantalizingly close, Hacked couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They'd navigated not just the physical challenges of the race, but the new world of public scrutiny as well. Whatever happened in this final stretch, they'd shown the universe who they really were, not just racers, but pioneers, rebels, and maybe, just maybe, the spark that would ignite a revolution. The casino station loomed large now, its gaudy lights a beacon in the void. Hacked steeled himself for the chaos to come, ready to face whatever the desperate final moments of the race might bring. The casino station's garish neon lights grew larger in the view screen as the broken promise hurtled towards the finish line. Hack's paws flew over his console, making minute adjustments to their course. They were in second place now, with the lead ship just barely ahead. Status report, Jeb called out, his voice tense with concentration. Lead ship is 500 meters ahead, Hacked responded. But we've got company. 3 ships closing fast from behind, and they're not looking friendly. As if to punctuate Hack's words, a series of energy pulses flashed past their port side. The weapons weren't lethal, the new rules had seen to that, but a direct hit could still knock out critical systems. Evasive maneuvers, Jeb ordered, his hands dancing across the controls. The broken promise weaved through space, dodging blast after blast. But each evasion cost them precious speed. Killian growled from his station. Captain, we can't keep this up. We need to do something, or we'll lose our position. Jeb's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. Hacked, how close are we to the finish line? 2 minutes out at current speed, Hacked replied. But at this rate, those ships behind us will overtake us in less than 1. A grim smile played across Jeb's face. Then it's time to play our trump card. Killian, prepare to deploy the steel ball cloud. Hacked, I need you to calculate the optimal release point and trajectory. Hack's mind raced as he ran the calculations. This was the moment they'd prepared for, the ace up their sleeve. Ready, Captain, he announced. optimal release point in 10 seconds. The pursuing ships were closing in, their aggressive maneuvers becoming more desperate as the finish line approached. Hacked could almost feel the tension radiating from the other crews, their desperation to win overriding all caution. Now Jeb commanded. Killian hit the release, and a cloud of gleaming steel balls erupted from the Broken Promise's aft section. For a split second, they hung in space, a beautiful, deadly constellation. Then chaos erupted. The pursuing ships, too close and too fast to evade, plowed straight into the cloud. Hacked watched on his sensors as the balls wreaked havoc on their systems. Engines sputtered, navigation arrays went haywire, and shields flickered and failed. But they weren't out of danger yet. The lead ship, desperate to maintain its position, attempted a risky maneuver, cutting directly across their path. "Collision imminent," Hacked cried out. Jeb's response was instant. He sent the Broken Promise into a barrel roll that skimmed them over the top of the lead ship with mere centimeters to spare. The maneuver cost them speed, but it kept them in the race. As they straightened out, the finish line loomed directly ahead. The lead ship had lost momentum in its failed blockade attempt. It was now neck and neck. "Everything we've got to the engines," Jeb ordered. "This is where we win it." Hacked felt the ship surge forward as every last bit of power was diverted to thrust. Warning lights flashed across his console as systems redlined, but he ignored them, focused solely on the rapidly approaching finish line. In the final seconds, it was impossible to tell who was ahead. The Broken Promise and the lead ship crossed the line in a blur of motion, so close that Hacked couldn't be sure who had won. For a moment, silence reigned on the bridge. Then Hack's console lit up with the official race results. "Captain," he said, his voice thick with emotion, we did it. First place, by less than a meter." The bridge erupted in cheers. Crew members embraced, laughed, some even cried. They had done it. Against all odds, against new rules and public scrutiny and desperate competitors, they had emerged victorious. As the Broken Promise docked at the casino station, Hacked realized that the red interview light was still blinking. The universe had witnessed their triumph in real time. Jeb, noticing the light too, addressed the unseen audience. "To everyone watching, remember this: we race not just for ourselves, but for every being who's been wronged by a corrupt system. Today's victory is for all of you, and we're just getting started." As they disembarked, ready to face the swarm of reporters and race officials, Hacked felt a surge of pride. They had won the race, yes, but more importantly, they had shown the universe who they really were. A team. A family. A force for change. The game had changed, but so had they. And as Hacked looked at his crewmates, his family, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Broken Promise had lived up to its name once again, breaking the promises of a rigged system and forging new ones built on integrity, skill, and unwavering determination. The universe was watching, and the revolution was just beginning. The docking clamps engaged with a resounding thud, securing the Broken Promise to the casino station. Hack's whiskers twitched as he took in the garish neon lights and flashy holographic advertisements that covered every visible surface of the docking bay. The station was a monument to excess and indulgence, a stark contrast to the gritty, life-or-death nature of the races they'd just endured. "Well, that was one hell of a race," Killian grunted, stretching his arms above his head. "I could use a drink. Maybe try my luck at the tables, eh?" Jeb opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the ship's proximity alerts blared. Hack's paws flew over his console, bringing up the external cameras. Captain Hacked called out, his voice tense. "We've got company. Looks like our security detail." Indeed, a group of stern-faced individuals in nondescript but clearly armored clothing was approaching the ship at a brisk pace. Hacked recognized them as the guards crews had assigned to protect them between races. Jeb's brow furrowed. "That's odd. They usually keep their distance." Hacked, "Open the airlock. Let's see what this is about." As the airlock cycled open, the lead guard stepped forward. His eyes darted around nervously, as if expecting an attack at any moment. Captain Sheets, he said in a low, urgent voice. We need you and your crew to remain on your ship. It's not safe out there. Jeb's eyes narrowed. Not safe. We just finished a race through an asteroid field. What could be more dangerous than that? The guard leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. The new non-lethal rules? They're a ruse. A short-term ploy to lull everyone into a false sense of security. We have intel suggesting that. Unsanctioned activities are planned. Hacked felt a chill run down his spine. He'd known the rule changes were too good to be true. But this was beyond what he'd imagined. Before they could press for more details, the station's announcement system crackled to life. A jovial voice boomed through the docking bay. Attention all racers. As a reward for your thrilling performance, you're cordially invited to enjoy the many entertainments our fine establishment has to offer. Drinks, games, and excitement await. Your winnings from the race will be automatically converted to casino credits. Enjoy your stay. A ripple of excitement passed through the crew. After the intense race and the stress of the past few weeks, the prospect of some relaxation was tempting. Hack saw several of his crewmates eyeing the exit eagerly. But Jeb's face had hardened into a mask of determination. Thank you for the warning, he said to the guard. We'll heed your advice, he turned to his crew. Nobody leaves the ship. That's an order. Disappointed mutters ran through the group, but nobody argued. They'd learned to trust Jeb's instincts. As the crew dispersed back to their stations, Hack noticed Captain Yara's ship docked nearby. She caught Jeb's eye through the viewports and raised a questioning eyebrow. Jeb shook his head slightly, a clear signal to stay put. Yara nodded, understanding passing between the Allied captains. Hack turned back to his console, running system checks and monitoring the station's communications. But he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over him. The flashing lights and cheerful announcements now seemed sinister, a thin veneer of excitement hiding something far more dangerous. As he worked, Hack noticed movement on the external cameras. Other racing crews were disembarking, heading eagerly towards the casino proper. He recognized some of them as members of Allied teams. Captain Hack called out, his voice tight with worry. Some of our allies. They're leaving their ships. Jeb came to stand behind him, watching the feeds with a grim expression. We can't stop them all, he said softly. But I've got a feeling we're going to regret not being able to. As the docking bay gradually emptied, leaving the Broken Promise and a few other cautious ships isolated in their berths, Hack couldn't help but feel they were sitting on a powder keg. The casino station loomed around them, no longer a beacon of celebration, but a glittering trap waiting to be sprung. Hours crawled by as the Broken Promise remained docked, its crew restless but obedient to Jeb's orders. Hack found himself glued to his console, monitoring every scrap of communication he could intercept from the station. The first sign that something was wrong came as a garbled distress call, quickly cut off. Hack's ears perked up, his fur standing on end as he tried to trace its origin. Captain, he called out, his voice tight with worry. I've picked up a distress signal. It's from one of our Allied teams. Jeb was at his side in an instant, his face grim. Can you locate the source? Hack's paws flew over the controls. It came from the lower levels of the casino, but it was cut off before I could get an exact location. A tense silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the soft pings of Hack's instruments as he continued to scan for signals. It wasn't long before more distress calls began to trickle in. One by one, Allied racers who had left their ships to enjoy the casino's offerings were going dark. Hack's stomach churned as he realized the pattern forming. They're being picked off, Killian growled, voicing what they were all thinking. One by one. Jeb's jaw clenched. Hacked, can you get a count? How many have we lost? Hacked swallowed hard, his paws trembling slightly as he tallied the numbers. 15 confirmed. No, wait, 17, 18. The number keeps rising, Captain. The hours that followed were a nightmare of helpless waiting. Hacked watched as the death toll climbed, each lost signal representing a friend, an ally, someone they had raced alongside and trusted. 25 Hacked reported, his voice hollow. 26. 27. Killian slammed his fist against a bulkhead. We should be out there. We could be helping them. But Jeb shook his head, his face a mask of anguish and determination. No, we'd be walking into the same trap. Our best chance is to stay together, stay alert. As the count reached 30, an eerie silence fell over the station's communications. The distress calls stopped. The garbled cries for help faded away. The silence was almost worse than the chaos that had preceded it. Hack's whiskers drooped as he slumped in his chair, emotionally exhausted. 30 confirmed casualties, Captain, all from Allied racing teams. Jeb's voice was tight with barely contained rage when he spoke. They're sending us a message, trying to weaken our alliance, break our spirit. Well, it's having the opposite effect on me, Killian snarled. I say we go out there and... He was cut off by a new announcement blaring through the station's comm systems. Attention all racers. We hope you've enjoyed the hospitality of our establishment. Please prepare for an exciting new racing opportunity. Details to follow shortly. Hack's fur bristled at the cheery tone, so at odds with the horror they'd just witnessed. He turned to Jeb, seeing his own mix of dread and determination mirrored in the captain's eyes. Whatever this is, Jeb said, his voice low and intense, it's not going to be like any race we've run before. Hacked, run every system check we've got. Killian, I want you to come up with every possible defensive measure we can implement without traditional weapons. Everyone else, to your stations. We're in uncharted territory now. As the crew scrambled to prepare for whatever was coming, Hacked couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a threshold. The facade of the races as mere entertainment had been shattered. They were in a fight for survival now, plain and simple. The casino station loomed around them, no longer a place of glitz and glamour, but a gilded cage filled with unseen threats. And somewhere out there, the architects of this deadly game were preparing to raise the stakes even higher. Hacked steeled himself, knowing that whatever came next would push them to their limits. But as he looked around at his crewmates, his family, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had survived everything thrown at them so far. They would survive this too. They had to. The alternative was unthinkable. The station's comm system crackled to life once more, the overly cheerful voice a stark contrast to the grim mood aboard the Broken Promise. Attention racers, we have an exciting opportunity for you. A special race, just for our esteemed guests here at the station. This event will not be streamed to the wider universe, it's a private show, just for us. Hack's whiskers twitched uneasily as he glanced at Jeb. The captain's face was a mask of suspicion. A race that's not broadcast, Jeb muttered. That doesn't make any sense. The whole point of these races is the spectacle, the entertainment value. Unless entertainment isn't the real point anymore, Killian growled. Jeb nodded grimly. Hacked, see if you can get through to Cruz. We need more information. Hack's paws flew over his console, attempting to establish a secure connection. But before he could make contact, alarms blared across the bridge. Captain Hacked cried out. We've got multiple contacts approaching. A lot of them. The external cameras showed a large group of rough-looking individuals converging on their docking bay. They were dressed like common thugs, but something about their movement caught Hack's eye. They're too coordinated, he observed. Look at how they're spreading out, covering all angles. Jeb's eyes narrowed as he studied the feed. You're right. This is no ordinary gang. They're trained, disciplined. Military, if I had to guess. As if on cue, the guards' crews had assigned to protect them sprang into action. They formed a defensive perimeter around the Broken Promise, weapons at the ready. Jeb, Killian said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. We can't just sit here. Those guards won't last long against those numbers. Jeb nodded, his jaw set with determination. You're right, crew, arm yourselves. We're going out there. Hacked felt a surge of fear and adrenaline as he grabbed a makeshift weapon, a wrench that had been modified with some nasty sharp edges. He wasn't much of a fighter, but he'd learned that in this world, you had to be ready for anything. As they exited the ship, the sound of weapon fire filled the air. Cruz's guards were engaged in a fierce firefight with the disguised military group. The skill of their opponents was immediately apparent. These were no common thugs. "Stay together," Jeb shouted over the din. "Watch each other's backs." Hacked found himself back to back with Killian, the big human's presence oddly reassuring as chaos erupted around them. He saw Jeb wade into the fray, his movements a blur as he took on multiple opponents at once. As Hacked ducked and weaved, using his small size to his advantage, he caught glimpses of the battle unfolding around him. Cruz's guards were fighting valiantly, but they were outnumbered. Several of Hack's crewmates were holding their own, years of hard living and survival instincts kicking in. But it was Jeb who truly stood out. There was a ferocity to his fighting that Hacked had never seen before. He moved with a deadly grace, each strike precise and devastating. And there was something else, a look of recognition in his eyes as he engaged certain opponents. Suddenly, Hacked understood. Jeb knew these people. Somehow, someway, he had encountered these soldiers before. The realization sent a chill down Hack's spine. This wasn't just some random attack. This was personal. The races, the rule changes, the tragedy that had unfolded on the station, it was all connected, all part of some larger, more sinister plan. As the battle raged on, Hacked couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled into something far bigger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The universe of racing that they thought they understood was crumbling around them, revealing a darker, more complex reality beneath. And at the center of it all was Jeb, fighting not just for survival, but against ghosts from a past that was finally catching up to him. The fight raged on, the docking bay a cacophony of weapon fire and shouts. Hacked found himself darting between larger combatants, using his small size and quick reflexes to strike at vulnerable points. But his attention kept being drawn back to Jeb. The captain was a whirlwind of controlled fury, each movement precise and devastatingly effective. As Hacked watched, Jeb engaged a particularly skilled opponent, their battle a deadly dance of strikes and counterstrikes. Suddenly, Jeb's expression changed, a flash of recognition crossing his face. "Sergeant Vex," Jeb spat, his voice filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Still doing the Empire's dirty work, I see." The man Vex sneered. "Sheets. Should have known you'd be too stubborn to die in these races." Their fight intensified, becoming personal in a way that made Hack's furs stand on end. As they clashed, more names were exchanged, more flashes of recognition. It was clear now these weren't just random soldiers. These were the very people who had captured Jeb, who had condemned him to this life of endless racing and mortal peril. With a final, brutal strike, Jeb laid Vex out cold. Standing over his fallen opponent, Jeb's face was a mask of cold fury. "It was never about justice," he said, his voice carrying in a momentary lull in the battle. "The races, the rule changes, all of it, it's just been one long execution." The revelation hit Hacked like a physical blow. All this time, they'd been fighting for their freedom, believing that if they just won enough races, they could earn their way out. But the truth was far darker. They were never meant to survive. As the last of their attackers fell or retreated, an eerie silence fell over the docking bay. The crew of the Broken Promise gathered around Jeb, all eyes on their captain, as the full weight of his words sank in. Captain Killian said, his gruff voice uncharacteristically gentle, "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Jeb's eyes swept over his crew, lingering on each face as if committing them to memory. When he spoke, his voice was filled with a cold determination that sent a shiver down Hack's spine. "We're dealing with a system so corrupt, so afraid of change, that they'd rather see us dead than free. The races, the challenges, the constant danger, it's all been designed to kill us off slowly, to make our deaths seem like accidents or the result of our own actions." He paused, his gaze hardening. "But they underestimated us. They underestimated our will to survive, our ability to adapt, to form alliances. And now we're a threat they can't ignore." Hacked felt a surge of emotions: fear, anger, a perverse sort of pride. They had survived against impossible odds, had thrived even. But at what cost? "So what do we do now?" Hacked asked, his voice small but steady. Jeb's response was immediate and fierce. "We fight, we race. But from now on we do it on our terms. No more playing nice, no more holding back. They want to make an example of us. Fine. We'll make an example of them instead. A murmur of agreement ran through the crew. Hacked saw the same determination, the same fire in the eyes of his crewmates that burned in Jeb's. We're going to strike fear into the hearts of everyone who thought they could use us for their sick entertainment, Jeb continued. We're going to expose their corruption, their lies. And we're going to win our freedom, not because they grant it to us, but because we take it. As Jeb's words rang out, Hacked felt a transformation taking place. The crew of the Broken Promise had always been fighters, survivors. But now they were becoming something more. Revolutionaries. Avengers. The game had changed, and they were no longer merely players. They were going to rewrite the rules, reshape the very nature of these races, and heaven help anyone who stood in their way. The adrenaline of battle faded, leaving in its wake a crushing silence. Hack's ears drooped as he surveyed the aftermath of the fight. The docking bay, once pristine and gaudy, was now scarred by weapon fire and stained with blood, not all of it from their enemies. Captain one of the crew called out, her voice trembling. We've got casualties. Jeb's face, already grim, seemed to age years in moments. How many, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 5 came the reply. Tarak, Zin Lu, Evers, Kali, and Sven. Hacked felt his heart sink. He knew each of those names, had shared meals with them, laughed with them, fought alongside them. Now they were gone, casualties in a war they hadn't even known they were fighting. As if sensing the crew's mounting distress, a group of station officials appeared, their faces masks of false concern. "We must insist you return to your ship immediately," one said, his voice oily with fake sympathy. "Oh, for your own safety, of course." Jeb's eyes flashed with barely contained rage, but he nodded curtly. "We'll go. But this isn't over." As they made their way back to the Broken Promise, Hacked couldn't help but notice how the officials carefully steered them away from the bodies of their fallen comrades. It was as if they were trying to erase all evidence of the battle, to maintain the illusion of the casino station as a place of fun and games. Once aboard, the full weight of their loss hit home. The ship, usually bustling with activity, felt eerily empty. Spaces once filled by their fallen crewmates now gaped like open wounds. Jeb gathered the remaining crew on the bridge, his face etched with a mixture of grief and determination. "We've lost good people today," he began, his voice low but steady. "Friends, family, they deserve better than this." Hacked felt a lump form in his throat, his whiskers drooping with sorrow. "But we can't let their sacrifices be in vain," Jeb continued, his voice gaining strength. "They died fighting against a corrupt system, and we're going to make damn sure that system falls." Killian, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly slammed his fist against a bulkhead. "Those bastards," he growled, his voice thick with emotion. "I swear, I'll make every last one of them pay." Jeb nodded, a fierce light in his eyes. "We all will, Killian. From now on, we're not just racing for our freedom. We're racing for justice, for vengeance, for everyone who's been chewed up and spit out by these blood sports masquerading as entertainment." As if on cue, the ship's comm system crackled to life. The same cheerful voice from before, now sounding almost mocking in light of what they'd been through, filled the bridge. "Attention racers, prepare for an exciting new challenge. Our next race will take you on a thrilling corkscrew route from the base of the station all the way to the top. All station guests will have prime viewing positions. Race starts in 1 hour. May the best team win." The crew exchanged glances, a mix of disbelief and grim determination on their faces. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Hacked said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't a race, it's an execution course." Jeb's jaw set in a hard line. "Then we'll just have to disappoint them." Hacked, start plotting our course. Killian, I want every non-weapon system we have converted for defensive use. The rest of you, prepare the ship. We're going to show these bastards exactly what the crew of the Broken Promise is capable of. As the crew sprang into action, Hacked felt a strange mix of emotions coursing through him. Grief for their lost comrades, fear of what lay ahead, but also a burning determination. They had been pushed to the brink, had suffered losses that cut deep. But they weren't broken. Far from it. The broken promise had lived up to its name once again, breaking the promise of a rigged system that thought it could control them. Now, they were going to break something else, the very foundations of the corrupt empire that had condemned them to this fate. With less than an hour before the race, the bridge of the broken promise was a hive of frenetic activity. Hack's paws flew over his console, mapping out the complex corkscrew route through the station. But his concentration was broken by Jeb's voice, tight with urgency. "Hack, I need you to establish secure channels with all our allied teams. Those who are left anyway." Hack nodded grimly, remembering the tragic losses they'd suffered. His whiskers twitched as he worked, bypassing the station's communication protocols to set up encrypted links. "Channels open," Captain Hack reported. "But there aren't many left to answer." Jeb's face was a mask of determination as he addressed the surviving allies. "This is Captain Sheets of the Broken Promise. I know you've all suffered losses. I know you're angry, scared, confused, but I need you to listen carefully." Hack watched as Jeb explained their discoveries, the true nature of the races, the organized hits, the attempts to break their alliance. With each word, Hack saw the faces on the comm screens transform, shock giving way to anger, then to a steely resolve that mirrored their own. "These bastards have been playing us from the start," Jeb continued, his voice gaining strength. "They never intended for any of us to win our freedom. This whole system is rigged, designed to kill us off for entertainment." A chorus of outraged voices filled the channel. Hack's ears flattened against his head at the cacophony of anger and disbelief. "So what do we do?" Captain Yara's voice cut through the noise, steady and determined. Jeb's eyes gleamed with a fierce light. "We fight back. This upcoming race? We use it. We show them that we're not just pawns in their game. We race hard, we race smart, and we race together." He paused, letting his words sink in. "No more playing by their rules. From now on, we make our own. We watch each other's backs, we share intel, and we do whatever it takes to survive and win." The responses came quickly, a resounding chorus of agreement. Hack felt a surge of pride and determination as he watched the alliance solidify, stronger now in their shared anger and purpose. As the communication ended, Jeb turned to his crew. "All right, people, this is it, the most dangerous race we've ever faced. Hack, what can you tell us about the course?" Hack pulled up a holographic display of the station. "It's a nightmare, Captain. Tight corridors, sudden turns, variable gravity fields. And with the corkscrew pattern, we'll be fighting lateral G-forces the whole way up." Killian growled from his station. "And let me guess, plenty of places for ambushes and accidents to happen." Hack nodded grimly. "Exactly. We'll be exposed and vulnerable at multiple points throughout the race." Jeb's jaw set in a hard line. "Then we'll just have to be faster, smarter, and more determined than they are. Hacked, I want you coordinating with the other team's navigators. Share your route calculations, find the safest paths." Killian, Jeb continued, "I know we can't use traditional weapons, but get creative. Anything that can slow down our opponents or protect us from accidents is fair game." As the crew rushed to make final preparations, Hack felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They were about to face their greatest challenge yet, but for the first time it felt like they truly had a chance to change the game. The station's announcement system crackled to life, signaling the 5-minute warning before the race. Jeb gathered the crew for one final word. "Remember," he said, his voice low and intense, "we're not just racing for ourselves anymore. We're racing for every ally we lost, for every racer who's been chewed up by this corrupt system. We're racing to expose the truth, to break this whole damn thing wide open." Hack felt a swell of determination as he took his place at the navigation console. Whatever happened in the next few hours, he knew one thing for certain: the universe was about to witness a race, unlike any other. The broken promise was ready. The alliance was united. And they were about to show the corrupt officials exactly what happened when you push desperate beings too far. The starting klaxon blared, and the broken promise shot forward, immediately thrust into a chaotic melee of ships. Hack's paws flew over his console, feeding Jeb a constant stream of navigational data as they corkscrewed up through the station's interior. "First turn coming up," Captain Hacked called out. "It's tight, barely wider than our ship." Jeb's hands moved with inhuman precision, guiding the broken promise through the turn with centimeters to spare. The screech of metal on metal told them not every ship had been so lucky. As they emerged from the turn, Hack's sensors lit up with warnings. Multiple contacts closing fast from behind. Without weapons, the race had devolved into a brutal contest of ramming and forcing opponents into obstacles. A ship to their port side veered sharply, clearly intending to slam them into an upcoming structural beam. "Not today," Jeb growled, dropping their altitude sharply. The attacking ship, unable to correct in time, crashed into the beam with a sickening crunch. Hacked winced at the destruction, but kept his focus on the path ahead. "We've got a series of alternating gravity fields coming up. It's going to play havoc with our maneuvering." As they entered the section, Hacked felt his stomach lurch. Up became down, then sideways, then down again in dizzying succession. Jeb fought the controls, using the shifting gravity to slingshot them forward, while other ships tumbled out of control. Captain Killian's gruff voice cut through the chaos. "Two of our allied ships are in trouble. Looks like they're being ganged up on." Jeb's jaw clenched. "Hacked, find us a path to them. Killian, prepare to deploy our safety measure." They dove into the fray, the broken promise weaving between attackers with deadly grace. As they approached their beleaguered allies, Killian unleashed their secret weapon. The cloud of steel balls erupted from the ship's aft section, spreading out in a glittering, deadly web. The pursuing ships flew right into it, their hulls peppered with impacts. Some spun out of control, while others limped away, systems clearly damaged. "Nice shot," Killian Hacked exclaimed, allowing himself a moment of victory. But the respite was short-lived. As they corkscrewed higher, the race grew even more frantic. Ships crashed into each other with increasing desperation. Hacked watched in horror as one of their allied vessels, its hull already compromised, was rammed by two opponents simultaneously. The resulting explosion lit up the station's interior. "We've lost the racing blind," Hacked reported, his voice tight with grief. They had known the cost would be high, but the reality of it was still crushing. Jeb's face was a mask of grim determination. "We keep going. We win this for them, for all of them." As they entered the final stretch, Hack's sensors picked up something alarming. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of energy buildup ahead. It's not on any of the station schematics." They rounded the final turn to see a shimmering energy barrier stretched across their path. Behind it, they could see the finish line and a group of race officials watching with cruel anticipation. "It's a trap," Jeb snarled. "They never intended for anyone to finish this race." Hack's mind raced. "Captain, if we divert all power to the shields and hit it at the right angle, we might be able to punch through." Jeb nodded. "Do it! Killian, give us everything we've got." The broken promise surged forward, every system screaming as they pushed beyond their limits. They hit the barrier at full speed, the ship shuddering violently as energy crackled around them. For a heart-stopping moment, Hacked thought they had failed. Then, with a final groan of protest from the hull, they burst through, trailing wisps of energy as they crossed the finish line. As the dust settled, Hacked realized they were the only ship to have made it through. The barrier had disappeared, leaving the remaining racers staring in disbelief. Jeb's voice was cold as he opened a channel to the officials. "We've won your race, we've exposed your trap, and we're not done yet." As the implications of what they'd just done sank in, Hacked felt a mixture of elation and dread. They had survived, had won against impossible odds, but he knew the real battle was just beginning. The corrupt officials wouldn't take this lying down. The next move in this deadly game would be theirs, and Hacked couldn't shake the feeling that it would be more dangerous than anything they'd faced before. But as he looked at his crewmates, at Jeb's unwavering determination, he felt a surge of hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The broken promise had lived up to its name once again, breaking through not just a physical barrier, but the very foundations of the corrupt racing system. The universe was watching, and the revolution had begun. The broken promise hung in its docking clamps, the ship's hull bearing fresh scars from the brutal race. Inside, the mood was a complex mixture of triumph, grief, and simmering anger. Hacked sat at his console, paws trembling slightly as he compiled the data from the race. The losses had been staggering. Of the Allied teams that had started the race, less than half had survived. The casualty reports scrolled endlessly on his screen, a grim testament to the true cost of their victory. Jeb's voice cut through the heavy silence on the bridge. "Hacked, get me a secure line to our surviving allies. It's time we had a real talk about what happens next." As Hacked worked to establish the connections, he could hear Killian muttering darkly about vengeance and payback. The weapons officer's usual gruff demeanor had hardened into something more dangerous, more focused. One by one, the faces of the surviving Allied captains appeared on the main view screen. Their expressions mirrored the mix of emotions Hacked saw in his own crewmates, battered, grieving, but with a steely determination in their eyes. Jeb addressed them, his voice low but intense. "We've all lost good people today. Friends, family, and for what? The sick entertainment of a corrupt system that never intended to let any of us go free." Murmurs of angry agreement rippled through the communication channels. But today, Jeb continued, "We did more than just win a race. We exposed their lies. We showed the universe that their perfect system can be beaten." Captain Yara, her face streaked with grime and what looked suspiciously like tears, spoke up. "So what's our next move, Jeb? We can't go back to racing like nothing's changed." Jeb's eyes hardened. "We don't. From this moment on, we're not racers anymore. We're revolutionaries. Every race, every public appearance, every broadcast, we use it to spread the truth, to rally others to our cause." Hacked felt a shiver run down his spine at the weight of Jeb's words. This was more than just a fight for their own freedom now. It was the start of something much bigger. As the Allied captains voiced their agreement, pledging their support to this new cause, Hack's console lit up with an incoming transmission. His blood ran cold as he recognized the source. "Captain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "it's the race officials. They're demanding we report for debriefing." The mood on the bridge shifted instantly, tension ratcheting up several notches. Everyone knew what this debriefing likely entailed. Jeb's face was grim as he considered their options. Finally, he nodded. "Patch them through, Hacked. It's time we had a little chat with our gracious hosts." As the sneering face of the lead race official appeared on screen, Jeb's demeanor changed. Gone was the cautious, rule-abiding captain. In his place stood a leader, a revolutionary ready to declare war on a corrupt system. "Gentlemen," Jeb said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "I'm afraid we'll have to decline your invitation. You see, we're a bit busy planning how to dismantle your entire operation." The official's face contorted with rage. "You fool. You have no idea what forces you're dealing with. We'll hunt you down, Will." Jeb cut the transmission with a decisive gesture. Turning to his crew and the Allied captains still on the line, he spoke with quiet intensity. "They'll be coming for us now, all of us. We need to be ready." Hacked felt a surge of both fear and excitement. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time it felt like they were truly fighting for something meaningful. As the crew of the Broken Promise began preparations for their daring escape from the station, Hacked couldn't help but feel that they had crossed a point of no return. The games were over. The real battle was just beginning. And as he looked around at his crewmates, his family, Hacked knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Broken Promise had become more than just a ship. It was now the symbol of a rebellion, a beacon of hope for all those trapped in the corrupt racing system. The universe was about to change, and they were at the heart of the storm. The smell of ozone and scorched metal still lingered in the air as Hacked Jabim hunched over his console, whiskers twitching nervously. The Broken Promise's docking clamps had barely engaged when the proximity alarms blared to life, causing the hybrid navigator to jump in his seat. Captain Hacked called out, his small paws flying over the controls. "We've got incoming. Multiple humanoid signatures approaching at high speed." Jeb Sheets was at his side in an instant, his weathered face set in grim determination. Identification. Before Hacked could respond, a familiar voice crackled over the ship's comm system. Broken promise, this is Cruz. For the love of all that's holy, let us in now. Jeb and Hacked exchanged a quick glance. The diplomat's voice was tight with barely contained panic, a far cry from his usual composed demeanor. Confirm visual, Jeb ordered, and Hacked quickly brought up the external camera feeds. The sight that greeted them sent a chill down Hack's spine. Cruz, along with a squad of heavily armed guards, was sprinting towards their airlock. Their faces were masks of urgency, and their weapons were drawn. "It's them," Captain Hacked squeaked, his fur standing on end. "But they look scared." Jeb's jaw clenched as he weighed their options. After the brutal race they'd just survived and the threats from the officials, every instinct screamed caution. But there was something in Cruz's voice, a desperation that couldn't be faked. "Open the airlock," Jeb commanded, his voice steady despite the tension Hacked could see in his eyes. "But Killian, be ready. If this is a trick." "Say no more," Cap, the gruff weapons officer, growled, his hand resting on his makeshift weapon. The airlock cycled open with a hiss, and Cruz practically fell into the ship, his guards piling in behind him. The diplomat's usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes wild as they darted around the bridge. "Thank the stars," Cruz gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "We made it in time." In time for what Jeb demanded, his posture tense and ready for action. Cruz's next words sent a wave of ice through Hack's veins, confirming their worst fears and setting in motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. The official's Cruz panted, his face pale with fear and exertion. "They're coming. And this time, they're not playing games. They're here to kill you all." Hack's whiskers twitched nervously as Cruz continued, his words sending shockwaves through the bridge. "The race officials were going to activate the self-destruct devices on your ships," Cruz said, his voice tight with urgency. "But we were one step ahead of them." Jeb's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Cruz allowed himself a small, grim smile. "My people running repairs have been busy. We covertly disabled the self-destruct mechanisms on all Allied vessels." A ripple of relief passed through the crew, but Hack noticed Jeb's expression remained guarded. The captain knew there was more to come. "But that's not all," Cruz continued, confirming Jeb's suspicion. "We managed to relocate some of those devices to ships belonging to the race officials' favorites." As if on cue, a series of distant explosions rocked the station. Hack's sensitive ears picked up the muffled booms, and his fur stood on end. "By the cosmic void," Killian breathed, a note of admiration in his gruff voice. "You turned their own weapon against them." Cruz nodded solemnly. "It was a necessary precaution. We couldn't risk them having that level of control over you any longer." Hack scurried to his console, paws flying over the controls as he pulled up sensor data. "Captain," he squeaked, "I'm detecting multiple hull breaches in the VIP docking sectors. Several ships have been completely destroyed." Jeb's face was a mask of conflicting emotions: relief at their narrow escape, concern for the lives lost, and a grim satisfaction at striking back against their oppressors. "How many?" he asked quietly. Hack's whiskers drooped slightly as he read the data. "At least 5 ships, sir. Maybe more. It's chaos out there." The gravity of the situation settled over the bridge. They had just witnessed and inadvertently participated in an act of war against the racing authorities. "We've crossed a line," Jeb said, his voice low but steady. "There's no going back now." Cruz nodded, his expression somber. "You're right, Captain. But believe me when I say this was our only option. The officials were never going to let you go, no matter how many races you won. This was the only way to break their hold." As the implications of their actions sank in, Hack couldn't help but feel a mix of terror and exhilaration. They had struck a blow against the corrupt system that had enslaved them for so long. But the retaliation, when it came, would be swift and merciless. "So what now?" Killian growled, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Cruz's eyes gleamed with determination. Now we get you out of here. But first, there's something else you need to know. Something that's going to change everything. Hacked braced himself, knowing that whatever came next would reshape their world once again. The Broken Promise and its crew were about to embark on a journey far beyond the confines of any race they had ever run before. As the reality of their situation sank in, Cruz's eyes darted around the bridge, a hint of nervous energy in his movements. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Our people have been busy." With a quick gesture, Cruz signaled to his guards. They immediately began opening large, nondescript crates they had brought aboard. Hack's eyes widened as he recognized the contents. "Are those?" Hack began, his whiskers twitching in disbelief. "Your weapons," Cruz confirmed with a nod. "The ones that were confiscated. We've had them all along, waiting for the right moment." Jeb's eyebrows shot up. "How did you manage that?" Cruz allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Let's just say we have friends in low places. Now, we need to get these reinstalled immediately." As if on cue, a swarm of repair drones emerged from another crate, their mechanical arms already extending towards the exposed weapon mounts. "These drones are programmed with the schematics of your ship," Cruz explained. "They'll have you combat ready in no time." Hack watched in amazement as the drones set to work with incredible speed and precision. Weapon systems that had been dormant for so long began to hum to life, status lights blinking from red to green across his console. Captain Killian called out, a note of excitement in his gruff voice. "We've got full weapons capability coming online. It's like Christmas came early." Jeb nodded, his face set in grim determination. "Good. We're going to need every advantage we can get," he turned to Cruz. "What's our timeline?" Cruz checked a device on his wrist, his expression tightening. "We need to be off this station in less than 30 minutes. Any longer, and we risk being caught in the security lockdown." Hack felt his fur stand on end at the urgency in Cruz's voice. This was really happening. They were about to make a break for it, to leave behind the only life they'd known for so long. Jeb's voice cut through his thoughts. "I need you to plot us the fastest route out of here, and be ready for anything. I have a feeling this isn't going to be a smooth departure." Hack nodded, his paws already dancing across his console. As he worked, he could hear Jeb issuing rapid-fire orders to the rest of the crew, preparing the Broken Promise for what was sure to be a harrowing escape. The bridge buzzed with a nervous energy Hack had never felt before. It wasn't the usual pre-race tension, but something deeper, more primal. They were no longer just racing for victory or survival. They were racing for true freedom, for a chance to break away from the corrupt system that had held them captive for so long. As the weapons came fully online and the engines hummed with barely contained power, Hack realized that everything was about to change. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but potentially the fate of every racer, every prisoner trapped in this cruel game. With a deep breath, Hack steeled himself for what was to come. The Broken Promise was about to live up to its name once again, breaking free from the promises of a corrupt empire. And Hack was ready to navigate them towards a future none of them had dared to imagine until now. As the crew of the Broken Promise absorbed the gravity of their situation, Cruz's next words caught them all off guard. "Captain Sheets," Cruz said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I have a request. A rather significant one." Jeb raised an eyebrow, his expression a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Go on." Cruz took a deep breath. "I'm asking, begging really, for you to take us with you. Myself and my guards, we can't stay here now. Our cover is blown and will be as much a target as you are." Hack's whiskers twitched in surprise. He glanced around the bridge, noting the shocked expressions on his crewmates' faces. This was unprecedented, a race official, albeit a covert ally, asking to join their escape. Before Jeb could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life. Captain Yara's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Broken Promise, this is Stardancer. We're picking up chatter about an imminent security lockdown. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it fast." As if on cue, more voices joined the channel captains of their allied racing teams, all expressing the same mix of panic and determination. "We're with you, Jeb," one voice said. "Whatever the plan is, count us in." "We've come too far to back down now," another added. Hacked watched as Jeb's face cycled through a range of emotions: surprise, concern, and finally, a fierce pride. The captain turned to Cruz, his decision evident in his eyes before he even spoke. "All right," Jeb said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We do this together, all of us." He turned to address the assembled crew and the allies listening over the comm. "This isn't just an escape anymore. It's a rebellion. And every one of you needs to understand what that means. There's no going back after this. We'll be fugitives, hunted across the galaxy." Hacked felt a shiver run down his spine at Jeb's words, but also a surge of determination. They had been prisoners for so long, pawns in a cruel game. Now, they had the chance to write their own story. "So I'm asking each of you," Jeb continued, "are you sure? This is your last chance to back out?" The response was immediate and unanimous. Voices from every allied ship and from every corner of the Broken Promises bridge rang out in agreement. Hacked found himself speaking up as well, his small voice steady with conviction. "We're with you, Captain, all the way." Jeb nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Then let's do this. Cruz, get your people aboard. Hacked, coordinate with the other navigators. We're getting every allied ship out of here." As the bridge erupted into a flurry of activity, Hacked couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. They had entered this day as racers, as prisoners. They would leave it as rebels, as the vanguard of a movement that could reshape the galaxy. The Broken Promise was about to live up to its name in the grandest way possible, breaking the chains that had held them for so long. And Hacked, the once timid hybrid navigator, was ready to help chart their course to freedom. Hack's paws flew over his console, his large eyes darting between readouts as he coordinated with the other allied ships. The tension on the bridge was palpable, every crew member poised for action. "All allied ships report ready," Captain Hacked squeaked, his whiskers twitching with nervous energy. Jeb nodded grimly. "Cruz, it's now or never. Activate your virus." Cruz pulled out a small device, his finger hovering over a blinking red button. "Once I press this, there's no going back. The station's systems will be compromised, but it won't last forever. We'll have minutes at best." "Do it," Jeb commanded, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Cruz pressed the button, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, chaos erupted. Alarms blared throughout the station, lights flickering erratically. Hacked's console lit up with a flood of data as the station's security protocols went haywire. "It's working," Hacked exclaimed. "Docking clamps are releasing, and the bay doors are opening." Jeb's hands tightened on the controls. "All allied ships, this is Captain Sheets. Launch now, Formation Delta. Stay close and watch each other's backs." The Broken Promise surged forward, leading the charge as a dozen other ships fell into formation behind them. Hack's paws danced across his console, guiding them through the maze of the station's docking bays. "Station defenses are offline," Hack reported, his voice tight with concentration. "But I'm detecting multiple ships powering up. Looks like some of the officials are trying to pursue." "Let them try," Killian growled from his weapons station. "We've got a few surprises for them now." As they burst out of the station's massive bay doors, Hack gasped at the sight before them. The void of space, usually a comforting blanket of stars, was now a battlefield. Ships of all sizes were scrambling, some fleeing, others moving to intercept. "Evasive maneuvers," Jeb shouted as energy blasts lit up the space around them. The Broken Promise weaved and rolled, Jeb's expert piloting keeping them just ahead of the incoming fire. Behind them, their allies followed suit, creating a dazzling display of coordinated flying. Hack's heart raced as he called out trajectories and threats, his mind working overtime to keep them one step ahead of their pursuers. This was beyond any race they'd ever run, beyond any challenge they'd faced. This was a fight for true freedom. As they pushed their engines to the limit, leaving the station and its defenders behind, Hacked allowed himself a moment of hope. They had done it. They had escaped. But as the adrenaline of the moment began to fade, a new reality set in. They were now fugitives, with the full might of the Empire likely to be brought against them. The race for survival was far from over. It had only just begun. As the broken promise and its allied fleet streaked away from the chaos of the casino station, Hack found himself in familiar territory plotting courses through the void of space. But this time, everything felt different. They weren't racing towards a finish line, they were racing towards an uncertain future. Cruz, Jeb called out, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "You mentioned coordinates. Where exactly are we headed?" Cruz stepped forward, his earlier panic replaced by a look of determined focus. "Set a course for the following coordinates," he said, rattling off a string of numbers that Hack quickly input into the navigation system. As Hack's paws flew over his console, he couldn't help but notice something odd about their destination. "Captain," he squeaked, his whiskers twitching nervously, "these coordinates. They're an empty space. There's nothing there, at least nothing on our long-range scanners." Jeb's eyes narrowed. "Cruz, care to explain?" The diplomat nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Trust me, Captain. What we're looking for won't show up on any conventional scanners, but it's there, waiting for us." As the broken promise led the ragtag fleet of Allied ships deeper into space, Hack found his mind racing with calculations and possibilities. What could be waiting for them out there in the emptiness between stars? A hidden base? A refueling station? Or something beyond his imagination? Hours passed, filled with tense silence broken only by status reports and the occasional burst of chatter from the Allied ships. Hack kept a close eye on their pursuers, but so far, their escape seemed to have gone unnoticed, or at least unchallenged. "How much longer?" Killian growled, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Cruz checked a device on his wrist. "We should be approaching the rendezvous point in about an hour. Everyone should prepare for anything." As they neared their mysterious destination, Hack couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From a simple thief sentenced to a life of deadly racing, to a key player in what was shaping up to be a galactic rebellion. The sheer scale of it all was almost overwhelming. Yet, as he looked around at his crewmates, at Jeb's unwavering determination, Killian's gruff readiness, and the fierce hope burning in every pair of eyes, Hack felt a surge of confidence. Whatever waited for them at those coordinates, they would face it together. The broken promise surged onward, leading a fleet of ships that had once been bitter rivals and were now united in a common cause. As the minutes ticked down to their arrival, Hack steeled himself for whatever revelation awaited them. As the fleet of escaped racers settled into their journey, Cruz called for a meeting on the Broken Promises bridge. Hack watched as the diplomat's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mixture of relief and determination. "I owe you all an explanation," Cruz began, his voice carrying to all the Allied ships. "What you've just participated in is part of what we call Plan G, a long-term strategy developed by Julius IX to combat the Empire's tyranny." Jeb leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You mean this whole thing, the races, the sabotage, it was all planned?" Cruz shook his head. "Not exactly. We've had contingencies in place for years, waiting for the right moment. Your success, your alliance, it gave us the opportunity we needed." Hack felt a surge of pride mixed with uncertainty. They had been part of something bigger than they realized, but how much of their struggle had been manipulated? "Julius IX has been free for some time now," Cruz continued. "But we couldn't stand by while other worlds suffered under the Empire's rule. The racing system was just one symptom of a galaxy-wide disease." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just escapees anymore, they were now part of a full-scale rebellion against the Empire. "So what happens now?" Captain Yara's voice crackled over the comms, echoing the question on everyone's mind. Cruz's eyes gleamed with purpose. "Now we take the fight to them. The races were just the beginning. With your skills, your ships, and the intel we've gathered, we have a real chance to make a difference." Hack glanced at Jeb, trying to gauge his captain's reaction. To his surprise, he saw a fire in Jeb's eyes that he hadn't seen since their early days of racing. "You're talking about war," Jeb said, his voice low but steady. Cruz nodded solemnly. I'm talking about freedom. For all of us, for every world under the Empire's boot. It won't be easy, but I believe it's a fight worth having. As the discussion continued, outlining potential strategies and targets, Hacked felt a strange mix of emotions wash over him. Fear. Certainly they were about to face challenges far beyond anything they'd encountered in the races. But also hope, and a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. They had entered this day as prisoners, as entertainment for a cruel system. They would end it as revolutionaries, the vanguard of a movement that could reshape the galaxy. Hack looked around at his crewmates, at the faces of their allies on the view screen. He saw determination, resolve, and a shared understanding of the monumental task ahead. The Broken Promise had lived up to its name in ways they could never have imagined. Now, it was time to make a new promise, one of freedom, justice, and a better future for all. As the meeting concluded and they set course for their rendezvous point, Hacked couldn't help but feel that they were on the cusp of something truly extraordinary. The real race, the race to liberate the galaxy, was about to begin. As the coordinates crews had provided drew near, a palpable tension filled the bridge of the Broken Promise. Hack's paws hovered over his console, whiskers twitching as he scanned the seemingly empty space before them. "We're approaching the designated coordinates," Captain Hack reported, his voice tight with anticipation. "But I'm still not detecting anything on our sensors." Jeb nodded, his eyes fixed on the view screen. "Keep scanning, Hacked. Whatever Cruz has planned, it's got to be big." The minutes ticked by, each second feeling like an eternity. The Allied ships maintained their formation around the Broken Promise, a loose protective sphere ready for anything. Suddenly, Hack's console lit up with a flurry of readings. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of spatial distortion directly ahead. It's massive, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before." Cruz's voice came over the comms, a hint of excitement breaking through his usual composure. "That's it. We're right on schedule. Prepare for quite a show, everyone." As the crew watched with bated breath, the empty space before them began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from sun-baked pavement. The distortion grew, rippling and pulsing until it seemed to tear a hole in the very fabric of space itself. By the cosmic void, Killian breathed, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by awe. "What in the blazes is that?" Hack's paws flew over his console, trying to make sense of the readings flooding his screens. "It's some kind of cloaking technology, but on a scale I've never even imagined possible." As the spatial distortion grew, Hacked felt a shiver run down his spine. Whatever was about to reveal itself, he knew it would change everything. The races, their escape, even the revelation of Julius IX's rebellion, all of it paled in comparison to what was unfolding before them. "All ships, maintain position," Jeb ordered, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his posture. "Be ready for anything." The fleet of former racing ships hung in space, a tiny cluster of vessels dwarfed by the enormity of what was materializing before them. Hack found himself holding his breath, his large eyes wide as he tried to comprehend the scale of what he was witnessing. As the cloaking field began to dissipate, the true nature of their rendezvous point started to become clear. It wasn't a station or a hidden base, as some had speculated. It was something far, far bigger. Captain Hack squeaked, his voice barely above a whisper. I think we're about to meet our new allies, and they've brought quite a welcome wagon." The view screen filled with the emerging shape of something so massive it defied easy description. The crew of the Broken Promise, along with their allied fleet, were about to come face to face with a force that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. The shimmering distortion in space continued to grow, and suddenly, with a flash of light that momentarily blinded their view screens, it disappeared. In its place, filling their view and dwarfing their small fleet, was a sight that left everyone on the bridge of the Broken Promise speechless. A massive carrier, easily the size of a small moon, hung in space before them. Its hull gleamed with a polished sheen that spoke of advanced technology far beyond anything Hacked had ever encountered. Countless smaller ships swarmed around it like worker bees around a hive, and Hack's sensors were going haywire trying to catalog all the energy signatures. "Great Cosmos," Jeb breathed, his usual composure momentarily shaken. "Cruz, what exactly are we looking at here?" Cruz's voice came over the comms, filled with pride and a hint of satisfaction. "This, my friends, is the Liberator, the flagship of Julius IX's rebellion and the cornerstone of Plan G. With this, we have the power to challenge the Empire on equal footing." Hack's paws flew over his console, trying to make sense of the readings he was getting. "Captain, the technology on that ship, it's like nothing I've ever seen. The power output alone is off the charts." Killian let out a low whistle. "Would you look at those weapon banks? Makes our old racing armaments look like pea shooters." "Certainly. I'll make those adjustments to the final part. Here's the revised version of Part 9. As they marveled at the Liberator, a new transmission came through. A man in his early 40s appeared on their view screen, his uniform adorned with the insignia of a Grand Admiral. His face, though stern, carried a hint of familiar warmth that made Jeb lean forward in recognition. "This is Grand Admiral Marty Decker of the Liberator," he announced, his voice carrying an air of authority tempered with compassion. "Captain Sheets, on behalf of the free people of Julius IX and our allies across the galaxy, welcome to the rebellion." Jeb's eyes widened in surprise, and then crinkled with a smile. "Marty Decker, is that really you? Last time I saw you, you were a fresh-faced lieutenant." Decker's serious expression broke into a grin. "And you were the hotshot captain everyone was talking about, Jeb. It's good to see you again, old friend." Hacked glanced between Jeb and the view screen, his whiskers twitching with curiosity at this unexpected reunion. Jeb quickly filled in the crew. "Grand Admiral Decker and I served together in the war. He's President Decker's son, but don't let that fool you. He earned every rank through sheer grit and talent." Decker nodded appreciatively. "And now, Captain Sheets, we need that talent of yours more than ever. You and your fellow racers are more valuable than you know. Your skills, honed in the crucible of those death races, are exactly what we need. You're survivors, innovators, and above all, you understand the true face of the Empire's cruelty." As Decker continued to outline their role in the coming conflict, Hacked observed the way Jeb listened intently, nodding in agreement. It was clear that Jeb respected this man and his leadership. The Broken Promise and its allied fleet began to move towards the massive carrier, guided by tractor beams to one of its many docking bays. As they approached, Hacked could see hundreds of ships of all shapes and sizes already docked inside. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was an armada. "Well, folks," Jeb said, turning to his crew with a mix of determination and excitement in his eyes, "looks like our racing days are over. But something tells me the real adventure is just beginning." As the Broken Promise settled into its new berth aboard the Liberator, Hacked realized that their lives had changed irrevocably. They had entered this day as prisoners, as unwilling participants in a cruel sport. They would end it as freedom fighters, key players in a rebellion that could reshape the galaxy. The races had prepared them for this moment, honing their skills and forging them into a tight-knit team. Now, it was time to put those skills to use for a cause greater than mere survival. Hacked looked around at his crewmates, his family, and saw in their eyes the same determination he felt. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Broken Promise had lived up to its name one final time, breaking the promise of an oppressive empire and forging a new one, a promise of freedom for all. As the docking procedures completed and they prepared to disembark, Hacked knew that the greatest race of their lives was just beginning. And this time, the finish line was nothing less than a free galaxy. The moment their ship docked within the cavernous bay of the Liberator, Hacked felt a shift in the air. It wasn't just the change in atmosphere or the subtle vibrations of the massive carrier, it was the palpable sense of anticipation that seemed to permeate everything. Before Jeb could even finish the post-docking checklist, Cruz was at his side, his usual composure betraying hints of urgency. "Captain Sheets, a word in private, if you please," he said, gesturing towards the small conference room adjacent to the bridge. Hack's whiskers twitched with curiosity as he watched Jeb follow Cruz. The Hibbard navigator couldn't help but edge closer to the door, his sensitive ears straining to catch snippets of their conversation. "Jeb, I need you to understand something," Cruz began, his voice low but intense. "What's happening now, your escape, this rebellion, it's always been part of Julius IX's long-term strategy." Hacked could almost hear Jeb's eyebrows rising. "You're saying you planned all this? The races, the corruption, everything." Cruz sighed heavily. "Not exactly. We always intended to free the racers, to use the system's corruption against itself. But your actions, your alliances, they've accelerated our timeline considerably." There was a pause, and Hacked imagined Cruz running a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration he'd observed before. "To be frank, we've had to improvise quite a bit. Some aspects of this operation are, well, let's say they're more hodgepodge than I'm entirely comfortable with." Hack's fur stood on end as he processed the implications. They weren't just escapees or rebels, they were now key players in a galactic chess game that had been in motion for years. "So what now?" Jeb's voice carried a mix of determination and wariness that Hacked had come to associate with their most daring races. "Now," Cruz replied, "we meet with Grand Admiral Decker. He'll bring you and the other racers up to speed on the larger picture. But Jeb," his voice dropped even lower, forcing Hacked to strain to hear, "you need to know that what's coming. It's bigger than anything we've faced before. The fate of entire worlds could hinge on what we do next." As Cruz and Jeb emerged from the conference room, Hacked quickly busied himself with his console, pretending he hadn't been eavesdropping, but his mind was racing faster than any ship he'd ever navigated. They had entered this day as prisoners, as unwilling participants in a cruel sport. Now, on the cusp of something monumental, Hacked realized that their races had been preparing them for this moment all along. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: the crew of the Broken Promise was ready to face them head-on. As the call came through for all racers to assemble, Hacked felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Their greatest race was about to begin, and this time, the stakes were nothing less than the freedom of the galaxy itself. Hacked scurried alongside Jeb and the rest of the Broken Promise's crew as they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Liberator. The sheer scale of the carrier was overwhelming. Hack's whiskers twitched constantly, trying to take in every detail of this marvel of engineering. They entered a vast auditorium, already filling with former racers from various species. Hack noticed the mixture of excitement, confusion, and wariness on their faces, emotions he knew were mirrored in his own expression. As they took their seats, a low hum reverberated through the ship. Hack's sensitive ears picked up the subtle change in vibration. "We're jumping to FTL," he whispered to Jeb, who nodded grimly. Moments later, Grand Admiral Marty Decker strode onto the stage, his presence immediately commanding the attention of every being in the room. Hacked couldn't help but notice the way Jeb straightened, a look of respect and recognition in his eyes. "Fellow freedom fighters," Decker began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium, "I know you have questions. I know the past few hours have been a whirlwind of change and revelation. It's time you understood the full scope of what we're facing and the crucial role you all play in what's to come." The auditorium fell silent as Decker activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Vast swathes of it were colored in an ominous red. "This is the Empire's current reach," Decker explained. "For too long, they've ruled through fear, corruption, and spectacles of cruelty like the races you've been forced to endure." Hacked felt a ripple of anger pass through the crowd, his own fur bristling at the memory of their ordeal. "But what the Empire doesn't know," Decker continued, a hint of a smile playing at his lips, "is that their greatest mistake was bringing you all together." The hologram shifted, showing pinpoints of light scattered across the galaxy. "These are our allies' worlds, systems, even factions within the Empire itself, all waiting for the right moment to strike. And you, my friends, are the spark that will ignite this rebellion." Hack's eyes widened as he began to grasp the enormity of what Decker was suggesting. They weren't just escaped prisoners anymore, they were being asked to become the face of a galactic revolution. As Decker delved deeper into the strategy, explaining how the racers' skills and experiences would be invaluable in the coming conflict, Hacked glanced around at his fellow former prisoners. He saw determination hardening in their eyes, replacing the fear and uncertainty of moments before. The Hibbard navigator felt a surge of pride and purpose. All those races, all the near-death experiences, and hard-won victories, they had been preparing for this moment all along. As the briefing continued, and the Liberator hurtled through hyperspace towards Julius 9, Hack knew that their greatest challenge lay ahead. But for the first time in years, he felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. As the Liberator continued its FTL journey towards Julius 9, Grand Admiral Decker's voice took on a more solemn tone. Hack felt the shift in the atmosphere, his whiskers twitching with anticipation. "What I'm about to tell you," Decker began, his eyes scanning the room, "will change everything. As of this moment, Julius 9 is officially declaring war against the Empire." A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. Hack glanced at Jeb, seeing a mixture of determination and grim satisfaction on his captain's face. Decker continued, his voice steady and resolute. "We are not alone in this fight. For years, we've been building a network of allies across the galaxy. Planets, systems, resistance groups, all waiting for the right moment to strike." The holographic display shifted, revealing an intricate web of connections spanning the galaxy. Hack's eyes widened as he realized the true scale of the rebellion they were now part of. "But every revolution needs a symbol," Decker said, his gaze settling on Jeb and then sweeping across the gathered racers. "Something to rally behind, to inspire hope in those who have lost it. We believe you, all of you, can be that symbol." Hack felt a shiver run down his spine. Him, a symbol of hope? The idea seemed almost laughable, and yet. "You've survived the Empire's cruelest games," Decker continued. "You've formed alliances where they wanted only enemies. You've shown the galaxy that even in the darkest of circumstances, unity and determination can prevail." As Decker spoke, Hack saw the impact of his words on his fellow racers. Beings who had been bitter rivals just days ago were now nodding in agreement, a shared purpose uniting them. "We're not asking you to be soldiers," Decker clarified. "We're asking you to be beacons of hope. To share your stories, to show the galaxy that the Empire can be defeated. Your races were broadcast across the stars now. Let's use that fame to ignite a revolution." Jeb stood up, his voice carrying across the auditorium. "You can count on us, Admiral. We've been racing for our lives, now it's time to race for something bigger." A chorus of cheers and affirmations erupted from the gathered racers. Hack found himself swept up in the emotion, his small voice joining the others in a pledge of support. As the meeting concluded and the racers began to disperse, discussing their new roles in excited whispers, Hack felt a profound sense of purpose settling over him. They had entered this carrier as escaped prisoners, but they would leave it as the vanguard of a galactic rebellion. The Hibbard navigator looked at his crewmates, his family, and saw the same determination in their eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The race for freedom was no longer just about them, it was about liberating an entire galaxy. As the Liberator hurtled towards Julius 9, Hack knew that the greatest adventure of their lives was just beginning. And for once, he couldn't wait to see what lay beyond the finish line. The Liberator dropped out of FTL with a gentle shudder that Hack felt in his bones. He rushed to the nearest viewport, his large eyes widening at the sight before him. Julius 9 hung in space, a jewel of blue and green that seemed to promise everything they had been denied for so long. "It's beautiful," Hack whispered, his voice filled with awe. Jeb placed a hand on Hack's shoulder, his own eyes fixed on the planet. "That it is, my friend. That it is." Grand Admiral Decker's voice came over the ship-wide comm system. "Attention all former racers. We are now in orbit around Julius 9, your new home." Hack's ears perked up at the word home. It felt strange, almost foreign after so long. Decker continued, "As a gesture of good faith and in recognition of your ordeal, you have all been granted immediate citizenship on Julius 9. This is your world now, as much as it is ours." A cheer went up from the gathered racers, the sound of joy and disbelief mingling in the air. Furthermore, Decker added, "You will all have 1 week of complete freedom on the planet. Use this time to rest, to heal, and to consider your future role in our cause." Hack felt a lump form in his throat. Freedom, real, unrestrained freedom. It was almost too much to comprehend. "Remember," Decker's voice softened, "while we hope you'll join us in our fight against the Empire, you are under no obligation to do so. Your citizenship is unconditional. This is not a race, not a competition. It's a chance for you to reclaim your lives." As Decker's announcement concluded, Hack looked around at his crewmates. Killian was trying to hide the moisture in his eyes, while others were embracing, laughing, some even crying openly. Jeb gathered his crew close. "Well, folks," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we made it. Whatever comes next, we face it as free beings." They made their way to the shuttle bay, joining the throng of former racers eager to set foot on their new home. As they boarded the shuttle that would take them to the planet's surface, Hack felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The small Hibbard looked back at the broken Promise, still docked in the Liberator's massive bay. That ship had been their prison, their home, their lifeline. Now, it stood as a testament to everything they had endured and overcome. As the shuttle's doors closed and it began its descent towards Julius 9, Hack realized that their greatest race was indeed just beginning. But this time, they weren't racing against each other or against a cruel system. They were racing towards a future of their own making, towards freedom not just for themselves but for an entire galaxy. The surface of Julius 9 grew closer, a new world full of promise and possibility. Hack took a deep breath, ready to take his first steps as a free being, as a citizen, and perhaps as a symbol of hope for countless others still trapped under the Empire's rule. The shuttle's descent was smoother than any landing Hack had experienced in years of racing, but his heart still pounded as if he were threading through an asteroid field. As the doors hissed open, Hack's sensitive nose was immediately assaulted by a barrage of unfamiliar scents: rich earth, fragrant vegetation, and the unmistakable freshness of clean, unrecycled air. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Killian's gruff voice broke through Hack's hesitation. "Thought you'd be the first one bounding out there, furball." Hack realized he had frozen at the threshold. With a deep breath, he took his first step onto the soil of Julius 9. The ground felt oddly soft beneath his paws, nothing like the unyielding metal decks he'd grown accustomed to. It's real," Hack squeaked, his whiskers twitching furiously as he tried to process the sensory overload. Around him, his fellow crew members were having similar reactions. Some laughed with joy, others wept silently, and a few, like Killian, kept glancing around, as if expecting an ambush at any moment. Jeb stepped up beside Hack, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Take it all in, my friend. We've earned this." But even as Hack marveled at the open sky above and the distant mountains on the horizon, a nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered caution. Years of racing had ingrained a deep-seated suspicion that anything too good to be true usually was. "It's not a trap, is it?" Captain Hack found himself asking, immediately feeling foolish for voicing his fears. Jeb's expression softened with understanding. "I know it's hard to believe, Hack, but this is real. We're free." As they were led towards a sleek transport vehicle, Hack couldn't help but notice Killian's twitchy behavior. The old weapons officer's eyes darted from side to side, his hand never far from where his blaster would have been. "Easy," Killian, Jeb murmured. "We're safe here." "With all due respect," Cap Killian growled, "I'll believe that when I've seen it with my own eyes. All of it." Hack empathized with Killian's wariness. After all, the human had been a prisoner even longer than the rest of them. Trust would not come easily to any of them. As they boarded the transport, Hack took one last look at the shuttle they'd arrived in. The broken Promise was up there, docked in the massive carrier. For so long, that ship had been their entire world. Now, a whole planet lay before them, full of possibilities and potential dangers. The transport hummed to life, whisking them towards the city in the distance. Hack's paws tingled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Their greatest adventure, it seemed, was just beginning. The transport glided smoothly through the outskirts of Arizona, the capital city of Julius 9. Hack's nose was practically pressed against the window, his large eyes drinking in every detail of the bustling metropolis. Towering spires of gleaming metal and glass reached towards the sky, while lush parks and gardens punctuated the urban landscape. "It's like something out of a dream," Hack murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Their guide, a cheerful young woman named Lyra, was in the middle of explaining the city's history when Hack's sensitive ears picked up a conversation at the front of the transport. So a voice said quietly to Jeb, "There's been a change of plans. Someone's here to see you." Hack's whiskers twitched with curiosity. He strained to hear more, catching fragments of the hushed exchange. Your wife, sir. She couldn't wait. Ilara Jeb's voice was a mixture of disbelief and longing. She's here. Hack's heart leaped. Jeb's wife. They had all heard so much about her over the years, Jeb's stories of home being a beacon of hope during their darkest races. Before Hack could process this information, the transport came to a stop. Jeb was quickly ushered out by a couple of officials, leaving the rest of the crew looking bewildered. Captain Killian called out, but Jeb was already gone, whisked away to his long-awaited reunion. A ripple of excitement passed through the crew. "Did you hear that?" one of them said. "The captain's wife is here." "I wish we could meet her," another added. "After all these years, it feels like we know her too." Hack nodded in agreement. Ilara had been a constant presence in their lives, even if only through Jeb's stories. She represented everything they had been fighting for: home, family, a life beyond the races. As the transport resumed its journey, Hack couldn't help but feel a tinge of envy. Not that he begrudged Jeb his reunion, but it was a stark reminder of what many of them had lost. The Hibbard wondered if he would ever see his own family again, or if they even remembered him after all this time. Lyra, noticing the change in mood, quickly tried to redirect their attention. "We're approaching the Central Plaza now," she announced brightly. "It's the heart of Arizona, where you'll find some of our finest restaurants and entertainment venues." But Hack's mind was elsewhere. As he gazed out at the city, he found himself imagining Jeb's reunion with Ilara. Would she recognize him after all these years? Would she understand what they had been through? The Hibbard shook himself out of his reverie. This was supposed to be their time to explore and enjoy their newfound freedom. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. As they disembarked at the Central Plaza, surrounded by the sights and sounds of a thriving city, Hack made a silent promise to himself. Someday, somehow, he would find a way to thank Ilara for being the beacon of hope that had kept them all going through their darkest times. For now, though, he had a new world to explore. With one last glance in the direction Jeb had disappeared, Hack turned his attention to the wonders of Arizona, ready to take his first real steps as a free being. As Jeb's unexpected departure sank in, Lyra quickly regained control of the group. "Let's continue our tour, shall we?" she said, her cheerful demeanor unwavering. "There's so much more to see." Hack found himself swept along with the group, his senses overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of Arizona. They wandered through bustling markets filled with exotic fruits and spices, past fountains that danced with light and water, and into grand plazas where citizens of countless species mingled freely. "This is the Grand Library of Arizona," Lyra announced as they approached a towering structure of crystal and stone. "It houses knowledge from across the galaxy, free for all to access." Hack's eyes widened at the thought. After years of limited information aboard the racing ships, the idea of unrestricted knowledge was intoxicating. As they moved through the city, Hack couldn't help but notice Killian's increasing agitation. The old weapons officer's eyes darted constantly, his posture tense, as if expecting an attack at any moment. "You all right there?" Killian Hack asked quietly. Killian grunted. "Too open. Too many unknowns. Don't like it." Hack understood. After years of confinement and constant danger, this freedom felt almost threatening in its vastness. Their tour took them to a public park, where families picnicked and children played without a care in the world. The scene was so far removed from their experiences that it felt almost surreal. "And here," Lyra said, gesturing to a gleaming building, "is one of our premier medical facilities. All citizens have access to top-notch healthcare, free of charge." This announcement caused a stir among the former racers. Many of them bore scars, both physical and mental, from their time in the races. The prospect of proper medical care was nothing short of miraculous. As the day wore on, Hack found his initial suspicions slowly giving way to cautious optimism. The people of Arizona seemed genuinely welcoming, and there were no signs of the oppression or cruelty they had come to expect from authority figures. "Our final stop for today," Lyra announced as the sun began to set, "is the Monument of Freedom." They arrived at a soaring structure, its twisting spires reaching towards the darkening sky. At its base, a plaque read in honor of all those who have fought and sacrificed for liberty across the galaxy. As Hack stared at the monument, he felt a lump form in his throat. For the first time, he truly began to believe that this freedom might be real, that they had escaped the endless cycle of deadly races and were now part of something greater. Looking around at his fellow former racers, Hack saw a mixture of emotions on their faces: hope, disbelief, and for some, like Killian, a lingering weariness. But there was also a growing sense of possibility, a realization that their lives could be more than just survival. As night fell over Arizona, bathing the city in a soft, warm glow, Hack allowed himself a small smile. As darkness settled over Arizona, Lyra guided the group towards the outskirts of the city. "We've prepared special accommodations for you all," she explained, her voice tinged with excitement. "I think you'll find them quite comfortable." The transport wound its way up into the rolling hills overlooking the city. Hack's nose twitched as he caught the scent of night-blooming flowers, a far cry from the sterile air of racing ships. "Here we are," Lyra announced as they crested a hill. "Your new homes." Hack's jaw dropped. Before them stood a cluster of elegant chateaus, their graceful lines silhouetted against the starry sky. Each building was spacious and well-appointed, a far cry from the cramped quarters they'd grown accustomed to. "These are for us?" Killian asked, his usual gruffness softened by disbelief. Lyra nodded, beaming. "One for each crew. We thought you'd appreciate staying close to your teammates." As they disembarked, Hack's paws sank into soft, cool grass. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt something so natural beneath his feet. Inside their assigned chateau, Hack's eyes widened at the luxurious furnishings. Plush beds, a fully stocked kitchen, and even a holographic entertainment system awaited them. "There are clothes in your size in the bedrooms," Lyra explained, "and the kitchen is stocked with a variety of foods. If you need anything else, just use the comm system to call for assistance." As the crew explored their new accommodations, Hack found himself drawn to a large window overlooking the city. Arizona sprawled below, a tapestry of twinkling lights. In the distance, he could make out the massive silhouette of the fleet headquarters where they had landed just hours before. It was all so overwhelming. After years of fighting for survival, of never knowing if each race would be their last, this peace and comfort seemed almost unreal. Hack's reflections were interrupted by Killian's approach. The old weapons officer stood beside him, his weathered face uncharacteristically thoughtful. "Quite a view, furball," Killian murmured. Hack nodded. "It's beautiful." "But is it real, Killian? Can we really trust this?" Killian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "Old habits die hard. But I want to believe it. For the first time in a long time, I want to hope." As the rest of the crew settled in, laughing and marveling at their new home, Hack felt a curious mix of emotions. Excitement, yes, and gratitude, but also a deep-seated caution that he knew would take time to overcome. Looking out over Arizona once more, Hack made a silent promise to himself. He would embrace this new life, this freedom they had fought so hard for. But he would also remain vigilant, ready to protect his newfound family if the need ever arose. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Hack curled up in a soft bed, his mind swirling with the events of the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new wonders to explore. But for now, safe in this beautiful chateau, surrounded by his crew, Hack allowed himself to truly relax for the first time in years. The race for survival was over. The journey to truly living was just beginning. Hack's eyes fluttered open as the first rays of Julius IX's sun filtered through the window. For a moment, he was disoriented, his body tensed for the familiar rumble of a ship's engine. Then reality washed over him. They were free, planet-side, safe. He stretched luxuriously, his paws sinking into the softest bedding he'd ever experienced. After years of sleeping on hard, cramped bunks, this felt like a dream. Hack allowed himself a few more minutes to simply enjoy the comfort, his whiskers twitching contentedly. The peace was broken by a gentle chime from the main living area. Curious, Hacked scampered out of his room, nearly colliding with a bleary-eyed Killian in the hallway. "What in the blazes?" Killian grumbled, but his complaint died on his lips as they entered the living room. Lyra stood there, flanked by a small team, all bearing trays laden with an array of mouth-watering dishes. The scent alone was enough to make Hack's stomach growl audibly. "Good morning," Lyra chirped, seemingly immune to the early hour. "We thought you might enjoy a proper Julius 9 breakfast." As the rest of the crew stumbled in, drawn by the commotion and the irresistible aromas, Hack's eyes widened at the feast before them. There were fluffy pastries drizzled with colorful sauces, steaming bowls of what looked like grain but shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and fruits in shapes and colors he'd never seen before. Is that glowberry compote?" one of the crew members gasped, reaching for a bowl of luminescent purple jam. Hack remembered Jeb's stories about the delicacies of his homeworld. The captain had described the glowberries with such longing that the crew had often joked about risking it all for just a taste. As they dug in, savoring flavors that put their bland ship rations to shame, Hack noticed the state of the kitchen. It was a mess, with empty containers and dirty dishes strewn about. He vaguely recalled some of the crew raiding the well-stocked pantry in the middle of the night, too excited and hungry to wait until morning. Lyra, noticing his gaze, just smiled. "Don't worry about the mess. We understand you were eager to try everything. There's plenty more where that came from." As Hack bit into a pastry that seemed to melt on his tongue, he felt a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the food. This wasn't just breakfast. It was a welcome, a celebration, a promise of the life they could now have. For the first time since landing on Julius 9, Hack allowed himself to fully relax. The suspicion and wariness that had been his constant companions for so long began to ebb away, replaced by a cautious optimism. As he looked around at his crewmates, their faces alight with joy and wonder, Hack knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with full stomachs and grateful hearts. As the crew was finishing up their breakfast, savoring the last bites of the Julius 9 delicacies, the door chimed. Hack's ears perked up as Jeb walked in, looking refreshed and carrying an ornate box under his arm. "Morning, everyone," Jeb said, his eyes twinkling with a mischief Hack hadn't seen in years. "Hope you're enjoying your first real meal in a while." The crew murmured their appreciation, still too engrossed in the food to respond properly. Jeb chuckled, then turned to Killian. "Killian, old friend," he said, holding out the box. "I believe it's long past time I gave you a proper birthday present." Killian's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Captain, I don't even remember when my birthday is anymore." "Then today's as good a day as any," Jeb replied, pressing the box into Killian's hands. With uncharacteristic hesitation, Killian opened the box. His eyes widened as he pulled out an ornate sidearm, its metal gleaming in the morning light. "Well, I'll be damned," Killian breathed, a rare smile spreading across his face. "A Colt M1911. Haven't seen one of these beauties in years." Hack tilted his head in confusion. "What kind of weapon is that? It doesn't look like any blaster I've seen." Jeb grinned. "That, Hacked, is a projectile weapon. It fires small metal projectiles called bullets." "Bullets?" Hack's whiskers twitched with curiosity. "But aren't energy weapons more advanced?" Killian chuckled, expertly checking the weapon's mechanism. "Sometimes, furball, older is better. These babies don't overheat, can't be deflected by energy shields, and pack one hell of a punch." Plus, Jeb added, "They're part of Julius 9's culture. We believe in self-reliance and the right to self-defense. Projectile weapons are a symbol of that." As Hack absorbed this information, Lyra stepped forward, holding a stack of data pads. "Speaking of self-reliance," she said, "we have something else for you all." She began distributing the pads to each crew member. Hack took his paws trembling slightly as he activated it. "These are your personal accounts," Lyra explained. "All your winnings from the races, they're yours now. Our cyber team managed to unlock the accounts frozen by the Empire and race officials." Hack's eyes widened as he saw the figure on his screen. It was more money than he'd ever imagined possessing. Looking around, he saw similar expressions of shock and joy on his crewmates' faces. Killian, who had been racing the longest, let out a low whistle as he checked his account. "I could buy my own moon with this," he muttered. For a moment the room was filled with excited chatter as the crew discussed their newfound wealth. But then Killian fell silent, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "You know," he said slowly, "there was this little bar on a backwater moon in the Rigel system. Always thought it'd be nice to have a place like that of my own someday." Jeb clapped him on the shoulder. "Why not go for it? You've certainly earned it." Killian nodded, then paused. "But what about the fight? The rebellion?" Jeb's expression softened. "That's the beauty of freedom, Killian. The choice is yours to make." As Hacked watched this exchange, he felt a swell of emotion. This wasn't just about money or gifts. It was about having options, about being able to choose their own paths for the first time in years. The room fell silent as Killian contemplated Jeb's words. The grizzled weapons officer turned the ornate pistol over in his hands, his face a mask of deep thought. "You know," Killian finally said, his gravelly voice softer than usual, "I've been dreaming about that little bar for years. Thought it'd be my ticket to a quiet life after all this madness." Hack's whiskers drooped slightly. The thought of losing Killian, who had been a constant, albeit gruff, presence throughout their racing ordeal, was unexpectedly painful. But Killian wasn't finished. He looked up, meeting Jeb's eyes with a fierce determination. "Thing is, Cap, I reckon that bar can wait a bit longer. This fight you're talking about? It's too important to sit out." A collective sigh of relief went through the crew. Jeb's face broke into a wide grin as he clapped Killian on the shoulder. "Glad to hear it," old friend Jeb said. "Wouldn't be the same without you watching our backs." Inspired by Killian's decision, Hacked felt a surge of courage. He stepped forward, his small frame standing as tall as it could. "I want to keep fighting too," Captain Hacked squeaked, his voice steadier than he felt. "You've given us our freedom. The least we can do is help others gain theirs." One by one, the rest of the crew voiced their agreement. The room filled with a palpable sense of purpose and unity that Hacked had never experienced before, even in their closest races. Jeb looked around at his crew, his family, with pride shining in his eyes. "I can't tell you how much this means," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want you all to understand something. This isn't like the races. You're not prisoners anymore. If at any point you want to leave, to start that bar or do anything else, you have that right." Killian snorted, a sound that was as close to a laugh as Hacked had ever heard from him. "Fat chance of that, Cap. We've come this far together. Might as well see it through to the end." As the crew began to disperse, discussing their plans and the fight ahead, Hacked felt a newfound sense of belonging. They weren't just survivors anymore, forced together by circumstance. They were a team, united by choice and a common cause. Hack's paw brushed against the data pad in his pocket, reminding him of the wealth now at his disposal. But as he looked around at his crewmates, he realized that he had already found something far more valuable than money: a purpose, and a family to share it with. The race for survival was over. The fight for freedom for themselves and for others was just beginning, and Hacked, the once timid Hibbard navigator, was ready to chart this new course alongside his crew. As the day progressed, Hacked found himself drawn back to the fleet headquarters in Arizona. His curiosity about Julius IX's military capabilities had been piqued, and he was eager to learn more about the fight they were joining. The headquarters was a hive of activity. Hacked's sensitive ears picked up a cacophony of voices, the hum of advanced technology, and the rhythmic march of soldiers. As he made his way through the bustling corridors, he noticed he wasn't alone in his curiosity. Several other former racers were there, eagerly absorbing information about Julius IX's fleet and military structure. A friendly officer noticed Hack's bewildered expression and approached him. "First time here?" she asked with a smile. "I'm Lieutenant Vex. Can I help you with anything?" Hack nodded enthusiastically. "I'm Hacked, former navigator of the Broken Promise. I was hoping to learn more about your fleet operations. We've pledged to join the fight, but, well, racing ships are quite different from military vessels." Vex's eyes lit up. A navigator. We could certainly use your skills. Come with me, I'll show you our command center. As Vex led Hacked through a series of high-tech rooms, explaining the various systems and protocols, Hacked felt a growing sense of excitement. This was so much more advanced than anything he'd worked with before, yet he could see how his racing experience could be applied. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the building. Hacked's fur stood on end as he saw officers rushing to their stations. "What's happening?" he squeaked, his old instincts kicking in. Vex's face was grim. "Looks like we've got some Empire sympathizers causing trouble in the city center. Stay here, you'll be safe." But her words were cut off by the sound of gunfire, not from within the headquarters, but from the streets outside. Hacked rushed to a window, his eyes widening at the scene below. Citizens of Arizona, armed with a variety of weapons, were engaging the attackers. Their coordination and skill were impressive, quickly subduing the threat before the official security forces could even arrive on the scene. By the cosmic void, Hacked breathed. "Is this normal?" Vex smiled proudly. "Welcome to Julius 9, Hacked. Every citizen here is trained and ready to defend our freedom. It's not just a right, it's a responsibility we all share." As Hacked watched the citizens efficiently handle the situation, a new respect for Julius 9's culture bloomed within him. This wasn't just a planet, it was a society built on the very principles of freedom and self-reliance that they had been fighting for all along. Turning to Vex, Hack's voice was filled with determination. "Lieutenant, how do I get one of those sidearms? I want to be able to help too, to be a hero like them." Vex nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit, Hacked. Come on, let's get you set up. Something tells me you'll fit in just fine here on Julius 9. As they headed towards the armory, Hacked felt a surge of pride and purpose. He wasn't just learning about a new way of life, he was becoming a part of it. The race for survival had shaped him into a skilled navigator, but this new chapter would transform him into something more, a defender of freedom. As the sun began to set over Arizona, casting a warm glow across the city, Hacked found himself back at the fleet headquarters. This time, however, he wasn't alone. The large auditorium was filled with former racers, their faces a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Jeb stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding as always. But there was something different about him now, a lightness, a sense of purpose that Hacked had never seen before. "Friends," Jeb began, his voice carrying easily through the room, "we've all been through hell together. We've raced, we've fought, we've survived. But now, we have a choice to make." Hacked felt a ripple of tension go through the crowd. Choice was still a new concept for many of them. "Julius 9 has given us our freedom," Jeb continued. "They've given us a home, resources, a chance at a new life. But they've also shown us what we're fighting for, a galaxy where everyone has these same opportunities." Jeb paused, his eyes sweeping across the room. "I'm asking you now, not as your captain, but as your friend, who among you wants to join this fight? Who wants to help bring freedom to others, just as it was brought to us?" For a moment there was silence. Then, slowly at first, but quickly gaining momentum, hands began to raise. Hack's paw shot up without hesitation, his heart swelling with pride as he saw Killian, still clutching his new sidearm, raise his hand as well. Within minutes, nearly every hand in the room was raised. The energy was palpable, a mix of determination, hope, and a shared sense of purpose. Jeb's face broke into a wide smile. He nodded to Lyra and the other guides, who stepped forward with data pads in hand. "These," Jeb explained, gesturing to the pads, "are enlistment forms. By signing them, you'll officially become soldiers of Julius 9. But I want you all to understand this is your choice. There's no shame in walking away, in choosing a different path." As the guides began distributing the pads, Hacked found his paws shaking slightly as he took his. This was the moment where he truly took control of his destiny. Around him, he could see his fellow racers signing without hesitation. Killian, usually so gruff and cynical, had a look of fierce pride as he put his name down. When it was Hack's turn, he paused for just a moment. He thought of all they'd been through, of the freedom they'd found here on Julius 9, of the citizens he'd seen defending their home. With a deep breath, he signed his name. As the last of the forms were collected, a cheer went up from the crowd. It wasn't the desperate celebration of surviving another race, but something deeper, more meaningful. They were no longer just survivors, they were volunteers, choosing to fight for something bigger than themselves. Jeb's voice cut through the noise, filled with emotion. "Welcome to the Julius 9 Defense Force, soldiers. We've got a galaxy to liberate." As Hack looked around at his fellow recruits, his family, he felt a sense of belonging stronger than anything he'd ever experienced. The race that had defined their lives for so long was truly over. A new journey was beginning, one of purpose, of hope, of freedom. Hack stood on the balcony of his new apartment, his whiskers twitching in the cool morning breeze of Julius 9. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of activity, emotions, and adjustments. As he gazed out over the sprawling cityscape of Arizona, he marveled at how quickly their lives had changed. The former racers had scattered across the city, each finding their own niche in this new world of freedom. Some had opted for the quiet life in the countryside, while others threw themselves into the bustling energy of Arizona's urban center. Hack had chosen a modest apartment with a view of both the city and the distant fleet headquarters, a constant reminder of their new purpose. He sipped at a steaming cup of glowberry tea, a luxury he was still getting used to. The complex, sweet flavor was a far cry from the bland nutritional supplements they'd subsisted on during their racing days. A movement in the apartment next door caught his eye. It was Zara, a Centaurian who had been part of a rival racing team. Now, she was Hack's neighbor and fast becoming a friend. She waved cheerfully, her 4 arms laden with colorful plants she was using to decorate her balcony. "Can you believe it, Hack?" she called out. 2 weeks ago, we were trying to outmaneuver each other in deadly races. Now we're discussing gardening tips." Hack chuckled, still marveling at the absurdity of their new reality. "I know. I never thought I'd see the day when my biggest concern was whether to get a Zabu fern or a star bloom for my living room." As they chatted, Hack's mind wandered to the other racers. Last he heard, Crix, the Veloxian engineer, had started a small repair shop in the industrial district. Lani, the Ephemeran pilot, had taken up residence in one of Arizona's floating neighborhoods, claiming it reminded her of her homeworld's gas giant cities. But the biggest surprise of all had been Killian. Gruff, cynical Killian, who had spent more years racing than any of them, had not only found a home on Julius 9, but had found love as well. Hack shook his head in disbelief, remembering the day Killian had announced his engagement. The old weapons officer had gone to one of Arizona's renowned vineyards, initially seeking a business partner for the tavern he was planning to open. Instead, he'd met Poppy, the vintner's daughter, and it had been love at first sight. "Still can't believe old Killian's getting married tomorrow," Zara mused, echoing Hack's thoughts. Never pegged him for the settling down type. Hack nodded in agreement. Life's full of surprises these days. But you know what? I think I'm starting to like it. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting Arizona in hues of gold and amber, Hack felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had found more than just freedom on Julius 9. They had found a home, a community, and a future full of possibilities. The vineyard was awash with lights and laughter as Killian and Poppy's wedding celebration was in full swing. Hack had never seen anything quite like it. The rolling hills of grapevines stretched out as far as his eyes could see, dotted with floating lanterns that gave the whole scene an ethereal glow. Killian, dressed in a sharp suit that was a far cry from his usual gruff demeanor, couldn't stop smiling. Poppy, radiant in a flowing gown that shimmered like starlight, hadn't left his side all evening. "Never thought I'd see the day," Jeb chuckled, sidling up to Hack with a glass of the vineyard's finest vintage in hand. "Our Killian married, and smiling no less." Hack nodded, still in awe of the proceedings. "It's like a dream, Captain. All of this. It's so different from what we're used to." Jeb's expression softened. "That it is, Hacked. But it's a good different. This is what we were fighting for all along, even if we didn't know it." As the night wore on, Hack found himself swept up in the joyous atmosphere. He tried foods he'd never imagined existed, danced to music that made his fur stand on end in a good way, and even managed to catch the bouquet during the traditional toss, much to his embarrassment and the amusement of his crewmates. But amidst the celebration, Hacked couldn't help but notice the underlying current of purpose that ran through all of them. Even here, in the midst of such happiness, they were aware of the larger fight that lay ahead. The next morning, nursing a slight headache from the unfamiliar wine, Hacked found himself back at the fleet headquarters for their daily training session. "All right, people," the instructor barked. "Today we're focusing on close quarters combat. Even on a ship, you need to be prepared for boarding actions." Hacked tried his best, but his small stature and lack of natural aggressiveness made him an easy target for his sparring partners. After being thrown to the mat for the umpteenth time, he couldn't help but feel a bit discouraged. "Don't worry about it," Furball Killian grunted, helping Hack to his feet. "We all have our strengths. Yours just happens to be up here." He tapped Hack's forehead with a calloused finger. Later, during a navigation simulation, Hack found his groove. His years of experience piloting through treacherous race courses translated perfectly to plotting complex flight paths through enemy territory. "Impressive work," Hack, the instructor, noted, reviewing his performance. "You've got a real talent for this. We'll make sure to put those skills to good use." As Hack left the training facility that evening, tired but satisfied, he reflected on the duality of their new lives. They were learning to enjoy the fruits of freedom, love, friendship, celebration, while also preparing for the fight to extend that freedom to others. It was a balancing act, to be sure, but one that Hack was finding increasingly rewarding. The races had honed their skills and forged their bonds. Now it was time to put those skills and bonds to the test in a fight that truly mattered. With a spring in his step, Hack headed home, ready for whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. Hack's paws flew over his console, his eyes wide with wonder as he took in the flood of data streaming across his screens. The bridge of the broken promise hummed with energy, but it was a far cry from the desperate, jury-rigged systems they had once relied on. "How were we looking?" Hack Jeb's voice carried across the bridge, steady and confident, as always. It's incredible," Captain Hack replied, his whiskers twitching with excitement. "The navigational systems are more responsive than anything I've ever worked with. And the sensor range. I can map our course through an entire star system with pinpoint accuracy." Jeb nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good to hear. Killian, how about our new toys?" Killian's gruff chuckle filled the comm channel. "Oh, you're gonna love this, Cap. We've got enough firepower to take on a small fleet. And the targeting systems? Makes our old setups look like slingshots." The broken promise had undergone a complete transformation. Gone were the patchwork repairs and cobbled-together systems. In their place stood cutting-edge technology that rivaled anything in the Julius 9 fleet. "All right, let's see what she can do," Jeb announced. "Hacked, plot us a course through the Zeta Nebula. Let's put those new FTL drives to the test." Hack's paws danced across his console, inputting the coordinates. With a subtle shift that was barely noticeable, the stars outside the view screen blurred into streaks of light. They were traveling faster than Hacked had ever thought possible, yet the ride was smoother than their old sub-light engines had ever managed. "FTL stable," Captain Hacked reported, his voice filled with awe. "We'll reach the nebula in 3 minutes." Jeb let out a low whistle. 3 minutes? That would have taken us days in the old setup. As they emerged from FTL at the edge of the Zeta Nebula, Hack gasped at the view. Swirling clouds of cosmic dust and newborn stars filled the view screen, more beautiful than anything he had seen in all his years of racing. "Let's take her in." "Nice and easy," Jeb ordered. "Hacked, keep an eye on those new sensor readings. Killian, be ready with the defensive systems. This nebula's been known to play havoc with ship systems." As they navigated through the nebula, Hacked marveled at how easily the broken promise responded to every command. The ship slipped between dust clouds and around gravity wells with a grace that seemed almost impossible for a vessel of its size. Captain Hacked called out, noticing something on his sensors. "I'm picking up some strange energy readings about 500,000 kilometers to port. Should we investigate?" Jeb considered for a moment. "Might as well. Let's see how our girl handles some scientific exploration." As they approached the anomaly, Hacked couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. Once they had been prisoners, forced to race for their lives. Now they were explorers, soldiers, defenders of freedom. The Broken Promise, like its crew, had been transformed. It was no longer just a racing vessel, but a ship of war, of exploration, of hope. As they delved deeper into the mysteries of the nebula, Hacked felt a surge of pride. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them head-on. As the Broken Promise glided through the Zeta Nebula, Hacked couldn't help but notice the new faces on the bridge. The Grand Admiral had assigned several human crew members to complement their existing team, and Hacked was still getting used to the change. To his right, Lieutenant Samantha Harding manned the newly installed tactical station. Her fingers danced across the controls with a precision that reminded Hacked of Killian in his prime. Energy fluctuations stabilizing, Captain, she reported crisply. The nebula's interference is minimal with our new shielding. Jeb nodded approvingly. Good work, Lieutenant. Keep those shields optimized. Behind Hacked, he could hear the low murmur of Sergeant Mike O'Brien briefing his Marine squad. The burly human had been assigned to lead the ship's security detail, a new addition that would have been unthinkable in their racing days. Hacked, Jeb's voice cut through his observations. How are you finding the new nav systems? Getting along with Ensign Ravi? Hacked glanced at the young human seated beside him. Ensign Ravi had been assigned to assist with navigation, particularly the new FTL systems. Initially, Hacked had been wary of sharing his domain, but Ravi's enthusiasm and quick mind had quickly won him over. It's different, Captain Hacked replied honestly. But good different. Ravi's been a great help in optimizing our FTL jumps. Ravi beamed at the compliment. Thanks, Hacked. I've learned so much from you already. Your intuition for spatial dynamics is incredible. As Hacked turned back to his console, he caught sight of Killian chatting animatedly with Chief Engineer Larson near the engine room access. The gruff weapons officer was gesticulating excitedly, probably discussing some new modification to their arsenal. It struck Hacked, then how seamlessly the new crew members had integrated with their team. Despite their different backgrounds, there was a shared sense of purpose that united them all. All right, people, Jeb announced, drawing everyone's attention. We've got a lot of new systems to test. Let's run a full diagnostic sweep. I want to know every quirk and capability of our girl before we head back to base. As the crew sprang into action, Hacked felt a familiar surge of excitement. The faces around him might be a mix of old and new, but the feeling was the same. They were a team, a family, united in their mission. The Broken Promise had evolved, just as they had. It was no longer just a racing ship, but a symbol of their new purpose. As Hack's paws flew over his console, coordinating with Ravi to plot their next move, he couldn't help but smile. They had faced impossible odds before. Whatever challenges lay ahead in their fight against the Empire, Hack knew they would face them together. New faces or old, they were still the crew of the Broken Promise. And they were ready for anything. Hack's whiskers twitched as an unfamiliar alert blinked on his console. His paws flew across the controls, double-checking the readings. Captain, he called out, his voice tight with sudden tension. I'm picking up multiple contacts at the edge of our sensor range. Configuration matches Imperial patrol vessels. Jeb was at his side in an instant, peering at the readouts. Good catch, Hacked. Lieutenant Harding, confirm those readings. Lieutenant Samantha Harding's fingers danced across her tactical station. Confirmed, Captain. 3 Imperial light cruisers, approximately 500,000 kilometers out. They don't appear to have detected us yet. The bridge fell silent for a moment as the implications sank in. This was no longer a test run, they were facing a real threat. Looks like we'll be testing our new systems sooner than expected, Jeb muttered. Then, louder, Killian, power up weapons, but keep them in standby. We don't want to tip our hand just yet. Hacked, plot us an intercept course that keeps us in the nebula's cover as long as possible. As Hacked worked on the calculations, he could hear Jeb opening a secure channel to Julius 9 Command. This is Captain Sheets of the Broken Promise. We've detected Imperial patrols in the Zeta Nebula, requesting instructions. There was a brief pause before a response came through. Broken Promise, this is Command. You are authorized to engage. Gather as much intel as you can, but your primary objective is to neutralize the threat. Be advised, we've been repelling similar patrols for weeks now. The Empire seems to be testing our defenses. Understood, Command Jeb replied, his voice grim. We'll take care of it. As Jeb began issuing orders to prepare for combat, Hacked felt a familiar mix of fear and excitement. This was what they had been training for, what their new ship had been built for. But it was also their first real taste of the war to come. Course plotted, Captain Hacked reported, pushing aside his nerves. We can approach using the dense portion of the nebula as cover. They shouldn't detect us until we're practically on top of them. Jeb nodded approvingly. Good work, Hacked. All right, everyone, this is it. We've trained for this, we're ready for this. Let's show the Empire what the new Broken Promise can do. As they began their approach, Hacked couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. Once they had been racing for their lives, scraping by on outdated equipment and desperate gambles. Now, they were a well-oiled machine, about to take on the very empire that had once enslaved them. The Broken Promise slipped silently through the nebula, closing in on its unsuspecting prey. Hack's paws hovered over his console, ready to make split-second course corrections. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain: they weren't just racing anymore. They were fighting for a future free from Imperial tyranny. The Broken Promise glided silently through the swirling gases of the Zeta Nebula, its advanced stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible. Hack's paws hovered over his console, ready to make instant adjustments to their course. Distance to target. Jeb's voice was low, tension evident in every syllable. 100,000 kilometers in closing, Captain Hacked reported. We should be in weapons range in approximately 2 minutes. Lieutenant Harding's voice cut in. Captain, I'm detecting increased activity from the Imperial vessels. I think they've spotted us. Jeb's response was immediate. Killian, weapons hot. Hacked, evasive pattern Delta. Let's show them what we can do. The ship surged forward, weaving through the nebula with a grace that belied its size. Hack's years of racing experience came to the fore as he guided them through a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible in their old vessel. The space around them lit up as the Imperial ships opened fire. But their shots went wide, confused by the Broken Promise's erratic course and the nebula's interference. Killian, you're clear to engage, Jeb ordered. A fierce grin spread across Killian's face. With pleasure, Cap. The Broken Promise's new weapons systems roared to life. Streams of energy and swarms of smart missiles erupted from the ship, each finding their mark with deadly precision. The lead Imperial cruiser's shields buckled under the onslaught, its hull breached in multiple places. Direct hits on all targets, Lieutenant Harding reported, a note of awe in her voice. Enemy shields are down to 30% across the board. Hacked could hardly believe what he was seeing. The ship that had once struggled to survive races was now decimating Imperial warships with ease. The battle was over almost as quickly as it began. Within minutes, 2 of the Imperial ships were drifting, dead in space, while the third turned tail and fled. Should we pursue? Captain Ensign Ravi asked eagerly. Jeb shook his head. Negative. Our mission was to neutralize the threat, not chase stragglers. Besides, he added with a grim smile, that one will report back. Let the Empire know what they're up against. As the adrenaline of battle began to fade, Jeb opened a channel to Julius 9 Command. This is the Broken Promise. Imperial patrol has been neutralized. 2 enemy vessels disabled, 1 retreated. Awaiting further orders. The response came quickly. Excellent work, Broken Promise. Return to base for debriefing. Be advised, we've been repelling similar patrols for weeks now. The Empire seems to be probing our defenses, waiting for us to make the first big move. As they set course for home, Hacked couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and apprehension. They had won this battle handily, but it was clear that it was just the opening skirmish in a much larger conflict. Well done, everyone, Jeb addressed the crew. We've proven that we're more than ready for what's coming. But stay sharp. Something tells me the real fight is just around the corner. Hacked nodded to himself as he plotted their return course. The races had prepared them for this, honed their skills and their teamwork. Now those skills were being put to use for something greater than mere survival. As the broken promise streaked towards Julius 9, Hacked realized that their greatest race was still ahead of them. But this time, the finish line wasn't just their own freedom, it was freedom for the entire galaxy. Hacked's whiskers twitched nervously as he followed Jeb and the rest of the senior crew into the debriefing room at Julius 9 headquarters. The adrenaline from their encounter with the Imperial Patrol had long since worn off, leaving behind a mix of pride and apprehension. Grand Admiral Decker was waiting for them, his face a mask of calm professionalism. "Captain Sheets, impressive work out there. Your report." Jeb nodded, launching into a detailed account of their engagement. Hacked listened with pride as his captain described their flawless execution and the broken promise's exceptional performance. As Jeb finished, Hacked noticed a flicker of concern cross the Grand Admiral's face. "A job well done, indeed," Decker said. "But I'm afraid it's just the tip of the iceberg. Captain Sheets, how many Imperial scouting missions would you estimate we've encountered in the past month?" Jeb frowned, considering. "Based on the activity we've seen, I'd guess. Maybe a dozen." Decker shook his head grimly. "Try 73. A stunned silence fell over the room. Hacked felt his fur stand on end as the implications sank in. 73, Killian growled, breaking the silence. "How the hell have they been getting so close without us noticing?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Decker replied. "We've managed to repel or destroy most of them, but they're getting bolder, probing deeper into our territory." Jeb's face hardened with determination. "Sir, request permission to take the broken promise back out on extended patrol. We can't let them keep snooping around our borders." Decker nodded, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "I was hoping you'd say that, Captain. Your ship's performance against that patrol was exemplary. We need you out there." As the meeting concluded and they filed out of the room, Hacked felt a familiar mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside him. They were heading back out, into real danger this time. "You okay there?" Furball Killian asked, noticing Hack's agitation. Hack took a deep breath, steadying himself, just processing it all. 73 incursions. What are they looking for? Killian's face darkened. "Nothing good, I'd wager. But whatever it is, they'll have to go through us to get it." As they made their way back to the broken promise, Hacked couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. They had once been prisoners, forced to race for the entertainment of others. Now, they were the first line of defense for their new home. The broken promise glided silently through the vast expanse of space, its sensors on high alert. Hack's paws danced across his console, constantly adjusting their course to sweep through the patrol zones most frequently probed by Imperial scouts. "Anything on scanners?" Jeb's voice broke the tense silence on the bridge. "Nothing yet," Captain Hack replied, his whiskers twitching with concentration. "Wait, I'm picking up something. Bearing 047, Mark 23. It's faint, but definitely artificial." Lieutenant Harding chimed in from her tactical station. "Confirmed, Captain. Looks like an Imperial cruiser, Harbinger class, but something's off about its energy signature." Jeb leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the tactical display. "Damaged, maybe? Hacked, plot an intercept course. Let's get a closer look." As they approached, the image on the view screen became clearer. The Imperial cruiser was indeed damaged, with visible scorch marks along its hull, and one of its engine nacelles flickering erratically. "We've got them dead to rights," Cap Killian growled from the weapons station, his fingers hovering over the controls. "Say the word and I'll light him up." But Jeb held up a hand, his brow furrowed in thought. "Hold fire, Killian. Something's not right here. That ship's damaged, but it's not using its FTL drive. It's limping along on sublight engines." Hack's ears perked up as he realized what Jeb was getting at. "You think they're heading somewhere nearby, Captain?" Jeb nodded. "Exactly. And I want to know where." "Lieutenant Harding, is our new cloaking system operational?" "Yes, Sir," Harding replied. "All systems green." "Good," Jeb said, a determined glint in his eye. "Engage the cloak. We're going to shadow our injured friend here and see where it leads us." As the cloaking field shimmered into place around the broken promise, Hacked felt a thrill of excitement. This was far beyond anything they'd done in their racing days, but somehow it felt right. They were no longer running a predetermined course, but charting their own path into the unknown. Hours passed as they followed the damaged cruiser, maintaining a safe distance to avoid detection. Hack's skills were put to the test as he kept them on course without the use of active sensors, relying instead on passive systems and his own intuition. Suddenly, a massive shape loomed ahead of them. Captain Hacked called out, his voice filled with awe. "I'm detecting a large object dead ahead. It's an asteroid. But it's huge, at least 100 kilometers in diameter." They watched in silence as the damaged cruiser approached the asteroid, which now filled their view screen. As they drew closer, Hacked could make out what looked like artificial structures on the asteroid's surface. Well, Jeb murmured. "Looks like we've found ourselves a secret Imperial base. Good work, everyone. Now, let's see if we can." His words were cut off by a sudden alarm from Hack's console. The Hibbard's paws flew across the controls, his fur standing on end. Captain Hacked cried out, panic edging into his voice. "The cloaking system, it's failing." As the cloaking field flickered and died around them, Hack's sensors lit up with new contacts. Dozens of small, fast-moving ships were emerging from hidden hangars on the asteroid's surface, all converging on their position. The element of surprise was lost. The broken promise was exposed, deep in enemy territory, with a swarm of hostiles incoming. As Jeb began barking orders and the crew sprang into action, Hack knew that their true test was about to begin. Evasive maneuvers. Jeb's voice rang out across the bridge as the swarm of Imperial scout ships closed in. "Killian, defensive systems online. Hacked, get us some room to breathe." Hack's paws flew across his console, his racing instincts kicking into high gear. The broken promise responded beautifully, weaving through the oncoming ships with a grace that belied its size. "Multiple targets, closing fast," Lieutenant Harding called out, reading weapons lock from at least a dozen hostiles. "Deploying countermeasures," Killian growled, his fingers dancing across the weapons console. A cloud of metallic chaff burst from the broken promise, confusing the incoming missiles. Hack's mind raced as he plotted their course. They were outnumbered and their cover was blown, but they still had one advantage: their intimate knowledge of the asteroid field from their racing days. Captain Hacked squeaked, an idea forming. "If we can make it to that dense cluster of asteroids at bearing 310, we might be able to lose some of these scouts. Their larger ships won't be able to follow us through." Jeb nodded sharply. "Do it, Hacked. Everyone, brace for some tight maneuvering." The broken promise dove towards the asteroid cluster, weaving between massive space rocks with precision that would have been impossible in their old racing ship. Behind them, several of the pursuing scouts misjudged their approaches, slamming into asteroids or colliding with each other in their haste. "It's working," Hacked exclaimed, his whiskers quivering with excitement. "We've lost almost half of our pursuers." But their reprieve was short-lived. As they emerged from the other side of the asteroid cluster, they found themselves face to face with the damaged Imperial cruiser they had been following earlier. "Incoming fire," Harding shouted. "They're targeting our engines." "Killian, return fire," Jeb ordered calmly. "Target their weapons systems. Hacked, get us behind them. Use their bulk as a shield against the remaining scouts." The bridge shook as energy blasts from the cruiser grazed their shields. But Killian's return fire was devastating, years of targeting practice in the races paying off as he systematically disabled the cruiser's weapon emplacements. Hacked guided them into position behind the now crippled cruiser, using it as cover against the incoming scout ships. From this vantage point, they had a clear view of the massive asteroid base. Captain Hacked reported, his eyes wide as he took in the sensor readings. "I'm detecting multiple hangar bays, defense turrets, and some kind of large energy signature at the core of the asteroid. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Jeb's face was grim as he surveyed the tactical display. "Looks like we've stumbled onto something big here, folks. Whatever that base is hiding, the Empire clearly doesn't want anyone to know about it." As the remaining scout ships regrouped for another attack, Jeb made a decision. We've seen enough. Hacked, plot us a course out of here. We need to get this information back to Julius 9. But as Hack began to input the escape vector, alarms blared across his console. Captain, we've got a problem. That energy signature from the asteroid is spiking, and it's interfering with our FTL drive. The crew of the Broken Promise watched in growing apprehension as the asteroid base began to glow with an eerie light. Whatever secrets it held, they were about to face them head-on, whether they were ready or not. The race to uncover the Empire's plans and to survive long enough to report them was reaching its most critical phase. FTL's down, multiple hostiles incoming, and we're sitting ducks, Killian growled, his fingers dancing across the weapons console. Just like old times, ACAP. Despite the gravity of the situation, Jeb allowed himself a grim smile. You said it, old friend. All right, team, this is what we've trained for. Hacked, get us moving. Evasive pattern Omega. Killian, light him up. The Broken Promise surged forward, its sublight engines pushed to the limit. Hack's paws flew across his console, guiding the ship through a series of maneuvers that would have been impossible in their old racing vessel. Energy blasts from the incoming scout ships filled space around them, but Hack's expert navigation kept them one step ahead. Meanwhile, Killian's return fire was devastating, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Shields at 78%, and holding Lieutenant Harding reported. Enemy numbers are thinning, but that energy interference from the asteroid is getting stronger. Jeb's mind raced, considering their options. They couldn't run, couldn't hide, and were quickly running out of enemies to fight. There was only one direction left to go. Hack, Jeb called out, his voice filled with determination. Plot us a course straight for that asteroid. Whatever's causing that interference, I want a closer look. Hack's eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't hesitate. Aye, Captain. Course plotted. But we'll be exposed to their defense turrets. Leave that to me, Killian interjected, a fierce grin on his face. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. As they closed in on the asteroid, its surface details became clearer. Massive hangar bays yawned open, defense turrets swiveled to track their approach, and at the center of it all, a pulsing energy signature that made Hack's first stand on end. Deploying countermeasures, Killian announced. A swarm of small, agile drones burst from the Broken Promise, each one emitting signals that mimicked their ship's signature. The asteroid's defenses went haywire, unable to distinguish the real target from the decoys. In the chaos, the Broken Promise slipped through, drawing ever closer to the heart of the Imperial base. Captain Hack called out, his voice tight with excitement and fear. I'm getting clearer readings on that energy signature. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Some kind of hyper-advanced power source, maybe? Or a weapon? Jeb leaned forward, studying the readings. Whatever it is, it's big. And if the Empire's gone to these lengths to hide it, you can bet it's not good news for the rest of the galaxy. As they closed to within 100,000 kilometers of the asteroid's surface, the full scale of the Imperial operation became clear. This wasn't just a base, it was a fortress, a staging ground for what could only be a massive military operation. We've seen enough, Jeb announced. Hacked, start recording every scrap of data you can. Killian, keep those defenses busy. We need to get this information back to Julius 9, no matter what. The Broken Promise hung in space, a tiny speck against the backdrop of the massive asteroid base. They were vastly outnumbered, cut off from reinforcements, and facing technology beyond their understanding. But as Hack looked around at his crewmates, at Jeb's determined face, Killian's fierce grin, Harding's focused concentration, he felt a surge of confidence. They had faced impossible odds before and come out on top. This was just another race, albeit with higher stakes than ever before. As the asteroid's defenses regrouped for another assault, Hack's paws hovered over his console, ready for whatever came next. The Empire's secret was laid bare before them, and the fate of the galaxy might well rest on their ability to get this information home. Hack's paws danced across the navigation console. The Broken Promise hung in space, a tiny speck against the backdrop of the massive asteroid base. Despite the imminent danger, they couldn't leave yet, not without gathering as much intel as possible. Status report. Hacked Jeb's voice cut through the tense silence on the bridge. Hacked swallowed hard before responding. Passive scans are still running, Captain. That energy signature. It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's pulsing, almost like it's alive. Lieutenant Harding chimed in from her station. I'm detecting multiple hangar bays, weapons emplacements, and what looks like a sophisticated sensor array. This isn't just a base, it's a fortress. Jeb nodded grimly. Whatever the Empire's cooking up here, it's big. Killian, how are our defenses holding? So far, so good, Cap, Killian growled. But I don't like how quiet it is. Feels like the calm before the storm. As if on cue, Hack's console lit up with new alerts. Captain, I'm detecting movement within the asteroid. Multiple ships powering up. It's a lot of ships, sir. How many is a lot? Hack Jeb asked, his voice tense. Hack's eyes widened as he processed the data. Dozens, sir. No, wait, hundreds. They're mobilizing everything they've got. The crew exchanged worried glances. They had stumbled onto something far bigger than they had anticipated. All right, people, Jeb said, his voice steady despite the growing threat. We've pushed our luck far enough. Hacked, start compiling all the data we've gathered. Killian, be ready to get us out of here at a moment's notice. As Hacked worked feverishly to collate the sensor data, he couldn't shake a feeling of dread. The mysterious energy signature pulsed on his screen, its power readings off the charts. Whatever it was, he had a sinking feeling that it could change the course of the war. Captain Hacked squeaked, his voice barely above a whisper. I think we might be looking at some kind of superweapon. The energy output, the scale of this base, it all points to something catastrophic. Jeb's face hardened at Hack's words. Then we need to make damn sure this information gets back to Julius 9. The fate of the galaxy might depend on it. As the first wave of Imperial ships began to emerge from the asteroid's hangars, Hack knew that their greatest challenge was just beginning. They had the data, but now came the hard part, escaping with their lives. Hacked's paws flew over his console as the first wave of Imperial ships poured out of the asteroid's hangars. His eyes widened at the sheer number of vessels emerging from the fortress. Captain, we've got incoming. Hack squeaked, his voice tight with tension. I'm counting over 100 scout ships, at least 50 fighters. And, by the cosmic void, there are even some light cruisers in the mix. Jeb's face was a mask of concentration as he absorbed the information. Killian, defensive systems to maximum. Harding, I want constant updates on their formation and approach vectors. Hacked, plot us an escape route, but keep us just on the edge of sensor range. We need every scrap of data we can get. The broken promise shuddered as the first volley of enemy fire splashed against their shields. Killian's hands danced across his weapons console, returning fire with deadly precision. Shields holding at 92%, Harding reported. But they're coordinating their attacks. We won't be able to hold them off forever. Hacked watched in awe as Killian's counterattacks found their marks. Imperial scouts exploded in silent bursts of light and debris, but for every ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Evasive maneuvers, Jeb ordered. Hacked, get us some breathing room. Responding instantly, Hacked guided the broken promise through a series of tight turns and rolls that would have been impossible in their old racing ship. The advanced Julius 9 technology allowed them to outmaneuver the Imperial forces, but the sheer number of enemies was overwhelming. Captain Hacked called out, his voice strained. I'm detecting power fluctuations in our shield grid. The constant barrage is taking its toll. Jeb's jaw clenched as he surveyed the tactical display. Killian, deploy the mine cloud. Let's see if we can thin out their numbers a bit. A swarm of glittering objects burst from the broken promise, quickly expanding into a deadly field. Several pursuing Imperial ships flew right into the trap, their hulls shredded by the tiny explosives. But the respite was short-lived. A new wave of Imperial forces emerged from the asteroid, their weapons already charging. We can't keep this up, Captain Harding warned, her voice tight. Our systems are advanced, but we're grossly outnumbered. Hacked's whiskers drooped as he realized the gravity of their situation. They had the speed and the technology, but against such overwhelming odds, it might not be enough. Just as hope began to fade, Hack's sensors lit up with new alerts. His heart sank as he processed the readings. "Captain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we've got bigger problems. Much bigger." As the crew turned to look at Hack's display, they saw a sight that made their blood run cold. The Empire wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Hack's paws trembled as he reported the new sensor readings. "Captain, multiple large contacts dropping out of FTL. I'm counting. 1, 2, no, a dozen capital ships." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that made even the battle-hardened Killian let out a low whistle. A massive Imperial battleship materialized at the head of the fleet, flanked by cruisers, destroyers, and frigates. By the stars, Jeb breathed, his usual composure momentarily shaken. "That's not a patrol. That's an entire battle group." Lieutenant Harding's voice was tight as she reported, "Sir, I'm detecting a massive energy spike from the asteroid. It looks like a distress beacon. These ships are responding to a call for help." The implications weren't lost on anyone. Whatever secrets the asteroid base held, they were important enough to warrant an immediate response from a significant portion of the Imperial fleet. "Well, folks," Jeb said, his voice steady despite the dire situation, "I think we've overstayed our welcome. Hacked, plot us the fastest course out of here. Killian, give us everything you've got to clear a path." As Hack's paws flew over his console, calculating their escape route, the newly arrived Imperial ships began to deploy their fighters. The space around the Broken Promise was quickly becoming a maelstrom of energy blasts and explosions. Shields down to 60%, Harding called out as a barrage from a nearby destroyer rocked the ship. "We can't take much more of this, Captain." Jeb's face was a mask of concentration as he guided the Broken Promise through the chaos. "Hacked, how long until we're clear for an FTL jump?" Hack's whiskers twitched as he made rapid calculations. "At least 10 minutes, Captain. We need to put more distance between us and that asteroid's energy field." 10 minutes might as well be 10 years in this mess, Killian growled, his fingers dancing across the weapons console as he returned fire. As if to punctuate Killian's words, a massive energy blast from the Imperial battleship narrowly missed them, the residual energy playing havoc with their systems. "That was too close," Jeb muttered. Then, louder, "All right, change of plans. We can't outgun them, but we might be able to outrun them. Hacked, divert all non-essential power to engines. Let's see what this ship can really do." As Hacked input the commands, he felt the Broken Promise surge forward with a burst of speed that would have been impossible in their old racing vessel. The confused Imperial fighters fell behind, unable to match their sudden acceleration. But the capital ships were still in pursuit, their massive engines pushing them to keep pace. As they raced away from the asteroid base, Hacked couldn't help but feel a mix of terror and exhilaration. They were pushing the Broken Promise to its limits, dancing on the razor's edge between escape and destruction. The Broken Promise streaked through space, its advanced engines pushing it to speeds that Hacked had only dreamed of during their racing days. The ship vibrated with barely contained power as they fled the pursuing Imperial forces. "Status report," Jeb called out, his hands steady on the controls as he expertly maneuvered through the debris field left by their earlier skirmish. Hack's paws danced across his console, his eyes wide as he processed the flood of data. "We're outpacing their fighters, Captain. Even their fastest interceptors can't keep up with us." A rare grin spread across Killian's face. "Ha! Bet those Imperial dogs never saw anything like this before. We're making them eat our dust." Lieutenant Harding's voice cut through the moment of elation. "Don't celebrate yet. The capital ships are still in pursuit, and they're launching long-range missiles." As if on cue, the ship rocked as a missile detonated nearby, its shockwave buffeting their shields. "Evasive maneuvers," Jeb ordered. "Hacked, I need you to plot us a course through that asteroid field ahead. Let's see if we can lose some of these missiles in the rocks." Hack's whiskers twitched as he quickly calculated the optimal route. "Course plotted, Captain, but it's going to be tight. At these speeds, we'll have less than a second to react to each obstacle." Jeb's eyes narrowed in concentration. Just like the old days, eh? Feed the course directly to my controls. Everyone else, brace for some fancy flying. The Broken Promise dove into the asteroid field, weaving between massive space rocks with a grace that belied its size. Hack's racing experience came to the fore as he and Jeb worked in perfect sync, anticipating each turn and roll before it was necessary. Behind them, the pursuing missiles slammed into asteroids, their explosions lighting up space. The few Imperial fighters that had managed to keep pace quickly fell behind, unable to navigate the treacherous field at such high speeds. As they emerged from the other side of the asteroid field, Hack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. We've lost all pursuit craft, Captain. Only the capital ships are still following, and they're falling behind rapidly. Jeb nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. Well done, everyone. Killian, how are our systems holding up under this strain? Like a dream, Cap Killian replied, genuine awe in his gruff voice. Whatever the eggheads back on Julius 9 did to this ship, it's miles beyond anything I've ever seen. We're pushing her to the limit, and she's asking for more. As they continued to put distance between themselves and the Imperial fleet, Hack couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. From a cobbled-together racing ship to this pinnacle of technology, the Broken Promise had evolved just as they had. Captain Hack reported, excitement creeping into his voice. At our current speed, we'll be clear for an FTL jump in just a few minutes. We're going to make it. The bridge erupted in cheers, the tension of the past hours finally breaking. They had faced down an entire Imperial battle group and lived to tell the tale. As the immediate danger faded and the Imperial ships became distant blips on their long-range sensors, a collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge of the Broken Promise. Hack's pause, which had been tensed over his console for what felt like hours, finally relaxed. I can't believe we actually pulled that off, Lieutenant Harding said, breaking the silence. Her voice was filled with a mixture of awe and relief. Killian chuckled, the sound gruff but genuine. Remind me to buy those Julius 9 engineers around when we get back. This ship, it's something else. Jeb nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. It's not just the ship, though that's a big part of it. It's us. Our experience, our teamwork. We've come a long way from those first desperate races. Hack felt a swell of pride at Jeb's words. He looked around at his crewmates, his family, and saw the same emotion reflected in their eyes. You know, Hack began, his voice soft but steady, back in the races, I always thought our ship was pushing the limits of what was possible. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined. Killian nodded in agreement. The firepower, the speed, the maneuverability, it's generations ahead of anything the Empire has. And it just saved our hides. As the conversation continued, the crew began to speculate on what they had witnessed at the asteroid base. Whatever they're building in there, Harding mused, it must be incredibly important. The response was too fast, too massive for it to be anything else. Jeb's face grew serious, which means the information we've gathered is absolutely critical. The fate of the war could hinge on what we've learned today. Hack's whiskers twitched as he considered the implications. They had started this journey as prisoners, forced to race for the entertainment of others. Now, they were at the forefront of a conflict that could reshape the galaxy. We've come so far, Hack said, voicing his thoughts. From racing for our lives to potentially saving countless others. It's overwhelming. Jeb placed a hand on Hack's shoulder, a gesture of understanding and support. That it is, my friend, but I can't think of a crew I'd rather have by my side for this fight. As they continued their journey back to Julius 9, the conversation flowed freely. They relived the thrilling escape, marveled at the ship's capabilities, and speculated on what challenges lay ahead. But underneath it all was a current of deep gratitude for their ship, for each other, and for the chance to make a real difference in the galaxy. They had been given a second chance at life, and they were determined to make the most of it. As Hack began the final calculations for their FTL jump home, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The Broken Promise and its crew were no longer just survivors or racers. They were warriors, explorers, and perhaps the galaxy's best hope for freedom. As the broken promise reached the safe distance for an FTL jump, tension began to build once again on the bridge. They were almost home free, but in space warfare, the final moments before a jump were often the most dangerous. "Status report," Jeb called out, his eyes scanning the tactical display for any signs of pursuit. "We're clear of the asteroid's interference field," Captain Hack reported, his paws flying over the navigation console. "FTL drive is spooled up and ready. Calculating jump coordinates to Julius 9 now." Lieutenant Harding chimed in. "Long-range sensors are clear. No sign of Imperial pursuit craft within range." Killian grunted from his station. "Weapons and shields are still operational, but we've taken a beating. We'll need some serious repair time when we get back." Jeb nodded, taking in the information. "All right, folks, we're not out of the woods yet." "Hacked. How long until the jump is ready?" "Final calculations complete in 30 seconds, Captain Hack replied, his whiskers twitching with nervous energy. As the seconds ticked down, the crew held their breath. The vast expanse of space around them seemed to press in, a reminder of how vulnerable they were until the moment they made the jump. Suddenly, Harding's console lit up with alerts. "Captain, multiple contacts just dropped out of FTL at extreme range. They're Imperial fast attack craft." "Time to jump," Jeb asked, his voice tense but controlled. 15 seconds, Hacked squeaked, his paws trembling slightly as he input the final coordinates. "Killian, deploy our last mine cloud," Jeb ordered. "Let's give our friends something to think about." A swarm of glittering objects burst from the broken promise, expanding rapidly into a deadly field between them and the approaching Imperial ships. 5 seconds to jump, Hacked called out. The bridge crew watched as the Imperial ships closed in, their weapons charging. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they might not make it. "Jump! Now!" Hacked cried. With a flash of light and a momentary feeling of displacement, the broken promise leaped into FTL. The stars outside the view screen stretched into lines, then a swirling tunnel of light as they hurtled through space at impossible speeds. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge. They had made it. "Well done, everyone," Jeb said, his voice filled with pride. "We've got a long journey ahead of us, but we're safe for now. Hacked, what's our ETA to Julius 9? Hacked checked his calculations. "At our current speed, we should arrive in approximately 18 hours, Captain." Jeb nodded. "Good. I want everyone to get some rest in shifts. We've got a lot to report when we get back, and I need you all sharp." As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, Hacked felt the weight of exhaustion settling over him. But mixed with the fatigue was a sense of accomplishment and purpose. They had survived against impossible odds, gathered crucial intelligence, and were now racing home with information that could change the course of the war. As Hack settled in for the long journey back to Julius 9, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Their adventure was far from over. In fact, he suspected it was only just beginning. The broken promise streaked through FTL, carrying its crew and its vital cargo of information towards home and towards the next chapter in their extraordinary journey. The broken promise dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the Julius 9 system, its hull still bearing the scars of their narrow escape. Hack's paws flew over his console, initiating docking procedures and preparing the data package they'd risked their lives to obtain. "Julius 9 Control. This is the broken promise requesting immediate clearance and priority channel to command." Jeb's voice was steady, but Hacked could detect the underlying urgency. "Broken promise, you are cleared for approach. Transmitting docking coordinates now," came the swift reply. As they maneuvered towards the orbital station, Hacked couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and apprehension. They were home, yes, but the information they carried could change everything. The moment they docked, Jeb turned to his crew. "Hacked, Killian, with me. The rest of you, begin compiling detailed reports. I have a feeling we'll all be debriefed thoroughly once command sees what we found." Hacked scurried after Jeb and Killian, clutching a data pad containing their findings. The corridors of the station were a blur as they rushed towards the command center. They burst into the briefing room, startling the officers present. Grand Admiral Decker looked up from a holographic display, his eyebrows raised at their abrupt entrance. "Captain Sheets, I trust you have a good reason for." Sir Jeb interrupted, something he'd never done before in Hack's memory. "We've discovered an Imperial superweapon, one that could potentially destroy entire planets." The room fell silent. Decker's face hardened. "Explain. Now." Hack stepped forward, his whiskers twitching nervously as he activated his datapad. A holographic representation of the asteroid base sprang to life in the center of the room. "We found this hidden Imperial base," Hack began, his voice steadier than he felt. "The energy readings we detected, they're like nothing we've ever seen before. And the Imperial response to our presence was overwhelming. Whatever they're building in there, it's of critical importance to them." As Hack and Jeb took turns explaining their findings and their harrowing escape, Decker's frown deepened. Just as they finished their report, an aide rushed in, whispering urgently in the Grand Admiral's ear. Decker's eyes widened slightly before he composed himself. "It seems we have corroborating evidence," he announced. "Our long-range sensors detected a massive energy spike in the sector you just left. Whatever this weapon is, it appears to be powering up." The implications hung heavy in the air. Hack felt his fur stand on end as he realized the full gravity of their discovery. Decker's voice cut through the tense silence. "Gentlemen, it seems we no longer have the luxury of time. We need to act, and we need to act now." He turned to his aide. "Summon the War Council immediately, and—" He paused, looking at Jeb and his crew. "Prepare our fastest ships and best troops. We're going to hit them before they know what's coming." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, Hack exchanged glances with Jeb and Killian. They had escaped one danger only to fly headlong into another, but this time they wouldn't be alone. The war room buzzed with activity as Grand Admiral Decker outlined the plan of attack. Hack's ears twitched, trying to catch every detail, while his paws nervously kneaded the edge of his seat. "Time is of the essence," Decker's voice cut through the chatter. "We can't allow the Empire to complete whatever they're building in that asteroid. Captain Sheets, your discovery may have saved us all." Jeb nodded solemnly. "What's our plan of attack, sir?" Decker activated a holographic display of the asteroid base. "We're going to hit them hard and fast. But we need ships that can outmaneuver their defenses and get our troops on the ground quickly." A sly smile crossed Decker's face. "That's where you come in. Or rather, all of you." With a wave of his hand, the hologram shifted to show a fleet of ships that Hack recognized immediately. They were racing vessels, just like the Broken Promise, each one modified and upgraded with Julius IX's advanced technology. "We're sending in the racers?" Killian asked, a note of excitement in his gruff voice. Decker nodded. "Exactly. Your ships are faster, more maneuverable, and better equipped for this kind of operation than our standard military vessels. Plus, you all have experience flying in tight formations under extreme pressure." Hack felt a surge of pride mixed with nervousness. They were being entrusted with a mission that could determine the fate of the entire war. "We've selected the top racing teams to lead this assault," Decker continued. "Captain Sheets, your crew will be at the forefront. Each ship will carry a complement of our best Marines for the ground assault." As Decker outlined the details of the plan, Hack saw familiar faces entering the war room. Captain Yara Hoffman's old crew and other racers they had competed against and later allied with during their escape from the Empire. "Once you breach the asteroid's defenses, your primary objective will be to disable whatever weapon they're building and, if possible, take control of the entire base," Decker explained. "We're talking about a potential game changer here, people, if we can turn their superweapon against them." The implications hung in the air. This wasn't just a defensive move, it was an opportunity to strike a devastating blow against the Empire. "You have 2 hours to prepare," Decker concluded. "Make every minute count." Dismissed. As the room emptied, Jeb turned to his crew. "All right, people, you heard the Admiral. Let's get the Broken Promise ready for battle. Hacked, I want you to coordinate with the other navigators. Your knowledge of that asteroid base could make the difference between success and failure." Hacked straightened up, feeling the weight of responsibility on his small shoulders. "Aye, Captain. I won't let you down." As they rushed to prepare for the mission, Hacked couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. From prisoners forced to race for entertainment, they had become the spearhead of a crucial military operation. The fleet of modified racing ships dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system, their sleek forms barely visible against the backdrop of space. Hacked's paws danced across his console, running final checks on their cloaking system. "All ships," report in Jeb's voice crackled over the secure comm channel. One by one, the other racing captains confirmed their readiness. Hacked felt a surge of pride as he recognized the voices of former competitors, now united in a common cause. "Sensor sweep complete," Hacked reported, his whiskers twitching as he analyzed the data. "Captain, it looks like most of the Imperial fleet has departed. I'm only detecting one capital ship, the battleship we encountered earlier." Jeb nodded grimly. "They must have pulled out to gather more resources for their weapon. Lucky for us. Killian, what's our tactical situation?" Killian's gruff voice carried a note of satisfaction. "Our cloaking is holding steady, Cap. As far as that battleship is concerned, we're nothing but empty space." "Good," Jeb replied. "All ships, maintain radio silence from here on out. We're going in." The fleet of racing ships glided silently towards the asteroid, their advanced engines barely a whisper in the void. As they drew closer, Hack's eyes widened at the sight of the massive Imperial base. "By the cosmic void," he breathed, "it's even bigger than I remembered." The asteroid's surface was now bristling with defensive turrets and sensor arrays, a far cry from the hidden base they had stumbled upon earlier. But thanks to their cloaking technology, they slipped past the defenses undetected. "Approaching designated landing zones," Hack reported softly, forwarding final approach vectors to all ships now. With a grace that belied their size, the racing ships settled onto the asteroid's surface in pre-selected spots, hidden from the base's sensors by natural rock formations. "Touchdown confirmed," Jeb announced. "All teams, prepare for ground deployment. Remember, we maintain stealth for as long as possible. Let's show these Imperial dogs what real racers can do." As the ship's hatches opened, Hacked watched the Marines and volunteer racers file out, their advanced suits allowing them to move undetected across the asteroid's surface. Despite his role as navigator, Hacked felt a strong urge to join them. "Captain," he squeaked, summoning his courage, "request permission to join the ground team." Jeb looked surprised for a moment, then smiled. "Granted, Hacked, but be careful out there. We need that big brain of yours in one piece." Hack nodded, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement as he donned his own stealth suit. As he stepped onto the asteroid's surface, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. They were about to infiltrate one of the most heavily guarded Imperial facilities in the galaxy. Hack's paws made no sound as he scurried across the asteroid's surface, his advanced stealth suit blending seamlessly with the rocky terrain. Around him, Marines and fellow racers moved with practiced precision, their forms barely visible even to his keen eyes. They approached one of the base's smaller entrances, a maintenance hatch that Hacked had identified during their previous visit. A Marine stepped forward, attaching a device to the hatch's control panel. Seconds later, it slid open silently. "We're in," the Marine whispered. "Remember, non-lethal takedowns only. We don't want to alert the entire base to our presence." Hack's heart raced as they entered the facility. The corridors were dimly lit, the low hum of machinery filling the air. He found himself instinctively checking for escape routes, a habit ingrained from years of racing. They encountered their first Imperial guards at a junction. Before Hacked could even react, 2 Marines had moved in, their movements a blur. The guards crumpled silently to the ground, stunned by the advanced weaponry of Julius 9. "Nicely done," Jeb's voice came through their comms, barely above a whisper. "Hacked, what's our next move?" Consulting the mental map he'd constructed during their last visit, Hacked replied, "We should take the service shaft 2 levels down. It'll lead us closer to the core without passing any major checkpoints." As they made their way deeper into the facility, Hacked couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. His racing instincts, honed by years of navigating treacherous courses, were proving invaluable in this high-stakes infiltration. They encountered more guards as they progressed, but each time the combination of their stealth technology and the Marines' expert takedowns ensured they remained undetected. Hacked even managed to stun a guard himself using a specially designed non-lethal weapon that fit his smaller frame. Finally, they reached a massive blast door, beyond which lay the heart of the asteroid base. Hack's whiskers twitched nervously as he examined the security panel. "This is it," he squeaked. "The core should be just beyond this door. But the security here is much tighter. If we trip any alarms now, we'll have the entire base coming down on us." A Marine stepped forward, producing a device that looked like a more advanced version of the one used on the exterior hatch. "Let's see what Julius 9 tech can do against Imperial security." As the device worked its magic, Hacked held his breath. Everything hinged on maintaining their stealth just a little longer. The blast door began to slide open with a faint hiss, revealing the cavernous chamber beyond. What they saw inside made Hack's blood run cold. The true nature of the Imperial weapon was about to be revealed, and he had a sinking feeling that it was even worse than they had imagined. As the blast doors parted, Hack's eyes widened in disbelief. The core of the asteroid was a massive, hollowed-out chamber, filled with a dizzying array of machinery and energy conduits. At the center, a colossal device pulsed with an ominous, otherworldly glow. "By the stars," one of the Marines whispered, voicing the shock they all felt. Jeb's voice came through their comms, tense and urgent. "What are we looking at, Hacked?" Hack's mind raced as he analyzed the structure before them. It's not just a weapon, Captain. They've turned the entire asteroid into some kind of massive projectile. Those energy readings we detected earlier, they're powering a propulsion system of unprecedented scale." The implications hit them all at once. This wasn't just a conventional superweapon, it was a planet killer, capable of obliterating entire worlds. And given its current trajectory, Hacked continued, his voice barely a whisper, its target is clear. They're aiming it straight at Julius 9. A heavy silence fell over the team as the full horror of the situation sank in. They weren't just fighting to disable a weapon anymore, they were in a race to save their entire world. "We need to shut this down," now Jeb ordered, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "Hacked, can you access their systems from here?" Hacked scurried towards a nearby control panel, his paws flying over the unfamiliar Imperial interface. "I think so, Captain, but it'll take time to decipher their security protocols." As Hacked worked feverishly to hack into the system, the rest of the team spread out, securing the perimeter and gathering what intel they could. The Marines' expressions were grim behind their visors as they realized the magnitude of what they were facing. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the chamber. Hack's heart leapt into his throat as he realized his intrusion had been detected. "We've been compromised," a Marine shouted, raising his weapon. The sound of running footsteps echoed from the corridors beyond. Their stealth advantage was gone, and now they faced the full might of the Imperial garrison. "Defensive positions," Jeb ordered. "Protect Hacked at all costs. He's our only chance of shutting this thing down." As the first wave of Imperial troops burst into the chamber, the air filled with the sound of weapons fire. The advanced technology of Julius 9 clashed with Imperial firepower in a dazzling display of light and energy. Hacked worked frantically, his paws a blur over the controls as he fought to override the asteroid's systems. Around him, the battle raged, each side fighting with the desperation of those who knew the fate of entire worlds hung in the balance. Just as Hacked thought he was making progress, a massive tremor shook the entire asteroid. Warning klaxons blared as the chamber was bathed in a red emergency light. Captain Hacked cried out, his voice filled with panic. "They've activated the propulsion system. The asteroid, it's starting to move." As the realization dawned on them all, Hacked knew that their mission had just become infinitely more complicated. They weren't just fighting to disable a weapon anymore. Now, they were in a desperate race against time to prevent the annihilation of their home. The battle for the asteroid had begun in earnest, and the fate of Julius 9 hung in the balance. The chamber shook violently as the asteroid's massive engines roared to life. Hacked clung to the control panel, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the Imperial systems. "We're out of time," Jeb's voice cut through the chaos of battle. "New plan, we need to take control of this entire base." "Hacked, forget about shutting it down. Find us a way to control this thing." Hack nodded, refocusing his efforts. His paws flew across the alien interface, searching for any weakness he could exploit. Jeb's voice crackled over the comms again, addressing all teams. "Listen up. We're splitting into 3 groups. Team Alpha, with me, we're headed for the bridge. Team Beta, secure the engine room. Team Gamma, find and protect the life support systems. We take those 3 points, we control this rock." The Marines and racers quickly reorganized, breaking off into their assigned teams. Hack found himself with Team Alpha, scurrying alongside Jeb as they fought their way towards the asteroid's command center. The corridors became a battleground as they advanced. The Julius 9 forces, though outnumbered, had the advantage of superior technology and the element of surprise. Imperial troops fell before their onslaught, but not without cost. Hack saw several of their own go down, the sight of his fallen comrades steeling his resolve. As they neared the bridge, resistance intensified. A barrage of Imperial fire pinned them down at a junction, the air thick with energy bolts and the acrid smell of ozone. "We need a distraction," Jeb shouted over the din of battle. Hack's eyes darted around, his racing instincts kicking in. He spotted a control panel for the corridor's emergency systems. "Cover me," he squeaked, darting out from cover. Blaster fire sizzled past him as he reached the panel, his paws working furiously to override the systems. Suddenly, the corridor was plunged into darkness. Moments later, emergency containment fields sprang to life, cutting off sections of the hallway and trapping many of the Imperial defenders. Now Jeb ordered, leading the charge through the confusion. They burst onto the bridge, catching the Imperial officers completely off guard. In a flurry of stun blasts and hand-to-hand combat, they secured the command center. "Bridge is ours," Jeb reported, as Hacked immediately set to work on the main control systems. Similar reports came in from the other teams. The engine room and life support were under their control. But their victory was short-lived. As Hacked accessed the navigation systems, his blood ran cold. "Captain," he said, his voice shaking, "we've got a problem. The asteroid's locked on course for Julius 9, and I can't override it. Whatever's controlling this thing, it's not from here." Jeb's face hardened as he realized the implications. "Then we find whatever's controlling it and we take it out. The Empire's not destroying our home. Not today, not ever." As the asteroid hurtled through space towards its unsuspecting target, Hack knew that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. They had taken the base, but the real battle, the race to save Julius 9, was far from over. Alarms blared throughout the asteroid as it continued its relentless journey towards Julius 9. Hack's paws flew across the control panels, his mind racing to find a solution. "Captain," he squeaked urgently, "I've located the source of the external control signal. It's coming from the Imperial battleship." Jeb's eyes narrowed as he processed this information, so that's why it stayed behind. "Killian, what's our weapon status?" Killian's gruff voice came through the comms. "We've got control of the asteroid's defensive systems, Cap. But they were designed to repel small craft, not take on a battleship." Hack's whiskers twitched as an idea formed. "Captain, what if we don't need to destroy the battleship? What if we could disable it?" "I'm listening," Jeb said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "The asteroid's propulsion system," Hacked explained quickly. "It's powerful enough to move this entire base. We can't override the navigational controls directly because of the battleship's remote access, but we can manipulate the raw thrust output." "How exactly?" Jeb pressed, leaning in. Hack's paws flew over the console as he explained. "The battleship is sending directional commands, but the actual power distribution to the engines is controlled locally. If I reroute power from non-essential systems and overload specific thrusters, we can create an uneven thrust pattern. It won't give us precise control, but it should be enough to ram them," Jeb finished, understanding dawning on his face. "Hacked, you brilliant little furball. Do it." Hack nodded, his pause becoming a blur as he worked, bypassing security protocols and rerouting systems never meant to work together. The asteroid shuddered as its thrusters began firing erratically, fighting against the battleship's commands. "Brace for impact," Jeb shouted. With a tremendous jolt, the asteroid slammed into the Imperial battleship. The collision wasn't enough to destroy the massive vessel, but it sent it spinning, its systems clearly damaged. Direct hit, Killian whooped. "Their shields are down, and I'm reading multiple hull breaches." Hack quickly regained control of the asteroid, stabilizing its position. "The battleship's control over our systems is broken, Captain. The collision must have damaged their transmitter. We have full autonomy now." Jeb wasted no time. "All defense systems, target that battleship. Let's finish this." The asteroid's weapons, now under their control, opened fire on the crippled Imperial vessel. Streams of energy lanced out, pummeling the battleship's unprotected hull. For a tense moment, it seemed the battleship might rally. But then, with a flash of light that momentarily blinded their sensors, it jumped to FTL, fleeing the battle. A cheer went up from the Julius 9 forces. They had done it. They had taken control of the asteroid and repelled the Imperial threat. As the excitement died down, Hack's console beeped with an incoming transmission from Julius 9 Command. "Broken promise. This is Control," came the voice of Grand Admiral Decker. "We're reading that the asteroid has changed course, and the Imperial forces have retreated. Report status." Jeb stepped forward, pride evident in his voice. "Control. This is Captain Sheets. The asteroid is secure. I repeat, the asteroid is secure. Requesting further instructions." There was a pause before Decker's reply came through. "Excellent work, Captain. Your new orders are to bring that asteroid home. It seems Julius 9 is about to get a new defensive platform." As the realization of their victory sank in, Hack couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They had not only saved Julius 9, but had also turned the Empire's weapon against them. The journey back to Julius 9 was tense but triumphant. Hack's pause rarely left his console as he guided the massive asteroid through space, still marveling at the sheer power under his control. "You know," Jeb mused, breaking the concentrated silence on the bridge, "it's going to be pretty amusing to see a second moon orbiting my homeworld." Killian chuckled gruffly. "Yeah, and this one's got teeth. The Empire's going to think twice before messing with Julius 9 again." As they approached their home system, the comms crackled to life. Grand Admiral Decker's voice filled the bridge, a hint of awe in his usually stoic tone. "Broken promise, this is Julius 9 Control. We have visual confirmation of your rather large cargo. Prepare for guidance to a stable orbit." The next few hours were a flurry of careful maneuvering and precise calculations. Hack worked in tandem with Julius 9's orbital control, his racing instincts proving invaluable as they guided the asteroid into a perfect lunar orbit. As the massive structure settled into its new home, cheers erupted both on the bridge and over the comms. They had done it. Not only had they thwarted the Empire's plans, but they had also delivered an unprecedented defensive asset to Julius 9. "Attention all hands," Decker's voice came through again, this time addressing all ships and the asteroid itself. "You've done more than win a battle today. You've changed the course of this war. Return to base for immediate debriefing. And one hell of a celebration." As they made their final approach to the orbital docks, Hack couldn't help but stare in awe at the sight before him. The asteroid, now permanently in orbit around Julius 9, looked like it had always belonged there. A new moon, bristling with defensive capabilities, ready to protect their home. The docking clamps engaged, and for the first time in what felt like ages, the crew of the Broken Promise could breathe easy. As they disembarked, they were met with a hero's welcome. Cheering crowds lined the corridors, and even the usually stoic Killian couldn't suppress a grin. In the midst of the celebration, Jeb pulled Hack aside. "You did good out there, Hack. Real good. From a racing prisoner to the navigator who brought home a moon. You've come a long way." Hack felt his fur ruffle with pride. "We all have, Captain. I'm just glad I could help." As they made their way to the debriefing, Hacked caught sight of the asteroid through a viewport. It hung in space, a testament to their victory and a promise of security for the future. The race that had started so long ago, when they were merely prisoners fighting for survival, had led them here. They had won more than their freedom. They had won a future for Julius IX and struck a mighty blow against the Empire. As Hacked followed his crew, his family, into the debriefing room, he knew that while one chapter of their journey had ended, another was just beginning. The galaxy was changing, and the crew of the Broken Promise would be at the forefront of that change. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.